Okay. Thank you. I want to welcome everybody. I'm sorry we're getting a slightly late start. We had intended to start at 1. We're trying a new format where we're sitting at a table. We will have you ask questions. This is supposed to be a question and answer session, followed by dialogue. So the people will line up at that microphone. If you want to wait in line, please wait in line in the front row. Once you have spoken once and you want to ask more questions, please wait in line in the second row so that we can very easily manage to make sure that all those who have not spoken get a chance to speak first. Okay? That's how that part's going to be managed. And then the other thing is we want you to limit it to questions rather than opinion. If it gets as heated as the last one did, we will go to written questions. Okay? This is a time for us to dialogue and for you to understand our perspective, and that is the tone and the mindset with which we enter this. So with that, let's start first. If this were a town hall, we would try to be done by 2 o'clock. Do people want a time ending at, let's say, 2 o'clock, or do you want it more open-ended? How many want a time ending at about 2 o'clock? Raise your hands, and that's including all the AV people in the back. So we may lose AV. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many people want it open-ended? Okay, it looks like that prevails. So it does mean, I think what the AV people are saying is that at some point they will stop the AV. Am I hearing that correctly? Okay, scheduled until 3 for the AV. Okay, so we will keep it open-ended. We will take questions one at a time. At 3 o'clock we will lose the AV, but we will continue going.
Do we have a prayer?
Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you. We'll need one. You want to take it?
I'd love to. Flying away, papers. Nothing is started in unity without prayer. As a matter of fact, nothing in life is started without prayer, because boys and girls, if you don't know it by now, you're never not prayerful. Give thanks in all things, be joyful always, and folks, pray unceasingly. Doesn't mean formal prayer. It means that we are always in prayerfulness. So what do we? Take a deep breath, unite as one as you know God to be. Beloved presence, we are grateful for your everywhere presence, knowing there's no place we can be where you are not. We are grateful for the indwelling Christ Spirit that is having its being as through us. We are the Christ. May we behave in that manner, knowing that's the truth of us. What appears to be is not true. What is a beautiful and unique expression of the Christ presence. And that is each one of us. We're grateful to stand in this Christ presence. We're grateful to express this Christ presence in all we think, say, and do. And we are grateful. We overflow with appreciation and give thanks in the nature of the living Christ. And so it is, and so we claim it to be. Amen.
All the board members are in attendance with the exception of Reverend Tim, who's leading a chaplaincy class, and Kathy Whitmire, who just flew in last night from Houston and picked up a cold in the process. So she is not driving in from La EA today. Okay, so with that, we're ready to start. Whoever would like to begin with the questions. Come up to the microphone, Slim.
Thank you. I thought you're going to have a session where the board is going to share with us some information, but that's not it. We are going into question. That's okay. Can you please, I was really, intrigued by the blue insertion in the bulletin last time. We talked about a police report, and I was appalled. I couldn't understand what it was about. I will appreciate if you can share with us what brought that about and where are we on that. Thank you.
I became aware of the police report when I walked into the last town hall session. I was handed a cover letter from the office of the senior minister, and in that cover letter, it referred to a Hawaii Police Department report and gave the report number. I asked at that time if the entire board was being served with one of these, and I was told no. I was being served with one, and Kathy Whitmire was being served with one. There was nothing in the content of that letter that referred to what was in the police report. But, and what was disconcerting for me, is said, if you ever, I'm paraphrasing, but it basically said, you've engaged in abusive behavior, and if you ever do it again, we will get a TRO or criminal charges would be filed. And I found that disconcerting because it referred to words and gestures, none of which was specified. So I was really in a quandary as to what I had done in the past, that if I did it in the future, I would be subject to a TRO or possible criminal charges. Needless to say, the next day I went down to the Hawaii Police Department. After first checking, Tim also told me that Kathy Whitmire was the other person being served. And I'm using served probably inappropriately, but anyway, it works. So I went down to the police department the next day after checking with Kathy to make sure that it was the same police report. Because I thought if it was the same police report, given that she lives in Laie, I could save her the trip. It was the same police report, so I went down and got the police report. As a suspect, which is which was how I was listed in the report, they redacted all of the information on the report except my name and identifying information and what was reported. What was reported, in some ways, much to my relief, was not a specific incident that said, like on January 3rd, you said this, you gestured this. That was not there. And I probably should have brought a copy. But anyway, it basically said it was a request for information about what to do next if harassing behavior continued. That was what was reported in that report. Then, in the meantime, I'm not sure of the timeline whether Jerry talked to me before or after I got the police report, but Jerry Denton said that he had had a conversation with Johanna Kelly and that Johanna Kelly was willing to share information with us. And so we held an executive session where she gave us some more background. Now, it's my understanding that because that was in executive session, the details of that are not to be shared other than what I've already reported to you from my experience of the police report. And so I think it would be up to the other persons named in the report if they wanted to share anything other than that. Now, some people have said, well, but you have the right to know your accuser, you have the right to know what you're accused of. I can tell you that that was not in the report, and I can also tell you you really don't have that right until you get to court. So I really don't get to know the identity of the people who are accusing me of what I don't know, because again, what was in the report was a request for information, unless they move forward. But we were told that charges were not filed, so I have no idea, but my guess is that no one is going to move forward with it unless whatever the action that happened before comes up again. I can also say, because this is not revealing confidential information, that we learned that there is an existing policy, an employee policy, that deals in part with harassment, and the board has committed to review that and get much clearer on what is harassing behavior. And I just, again, because you're coming and asking to hear our perspective, as much as uncomfortable as I am sure it is for someone who feels they are being harassed, it is very uncomfortable for me to know what could I possibly have gestured, what could I possibly have said that warranted calling the police. So I think we need to get some specific guidelines down so that there is a bright line and we know what behavior is acceptable and is unacceptable. So those discussions will take place probably over the next few months. I have already indicated to Robin Fall, who's the attorney for the school, who's trying to get a meeting together about internal policies, that one of the things that's high on my priority list is to get a definition of the behaviors that are acceptable and unacceptable. The other thing that I can say, again, because it's my personal story, is that it turns out that at the time this was happening, I had to be catching up on my mandatory continuing legal education, and I saw that there was a class in harassment of employees. So I took that class, and it has made me more aware of things that I was not aware of. For example, harassment, the standard for harassment, which in most legal settings is reasonable person, is not in a harassment situation. Harassment is from the perspective of the person being harassed. The other thing that I learned from that class is what he termed microaggressions, and there was a whole slide full of microaggressions, are increasingly moving toward being actionable. So I'm sure when we get around to having these discussions, we will start talking about these things as well and starting to get some clarity. What I also know is the other context in which harassment was raised specifically was when we were seeking information about accounting data, and an employee said they felt harassed. It has been reported to me, so you are getting it as hearsay, that the minister looked into it and did not find cause for harassment, and that's about as much as I know, which is probably more than you wanted to know.
Test. Thank you for sharing that police report. She did share it with the board, so we did see the redacted copy. But I just had a couple questions. I don't have the report with me, but do you recall there was a date on the report, the origination date of an event or something like that?
The date of occurrence for the event, the start date, was June 1st, 2017.
Okay.
And that was before I was on the board. So that event probably did not involve me.
Okay, and who signed the church, the report for the church?
That was redacted in my copy.
It was, okay. So, and none of us know, at least I don't as a board member, know who the accusers are or what specifically the accusations are. So it was very generalized, and it goes back over a year and a half. So I don't know what more we can do with this right now, but I really would like to have seen that employee policy be followed, the one that was in was that located in the employee manual for the church?
Yeah, there's a manual that I'm assuming it's still where it was. It was in Lisa's bookcase, and it said either policy in the singular or policies in the plural on the spine, and apparently it was found in that notebook.
Okay.
Kathy just gave me a copy, a loose copy.
Yeah, so clearly to me, as a board member, it's somewhat disturbing to me to see that policies are in place and they were not followed. And as a board member, I would really love to see policies and procedures be established and followed. Apparently it was there. It's been almost 2 years since I understand of the first occurrence. I think Reverend Tim was saying that the first occurrence he experienced within just a couple, 3 weeks of being here, and that would put it in late April or early May. The other thing that kind of blew me away was I didn't know any of this. I'm on the board. I didn't hear about this until about last summer, and it was hearsay also. So I would really hope in the future that the parties involved really work with it in a combined, methodical way in the guidelines that have already been established, and that it just doesn't keep going on and festering, and then old stuff, and then you get a police report that's really generalized and vague, and we don't even know who the people are that have these concerns. So it just strikes me as kind of odd and strange, but it does point towards a need, and the need is we got to work together, okay? Let's get these policies out there, know what they are. I'd love to have a copy of that employee policy, and maybe as board members we can take a look at that and see if it's adequate. We have other things at UWM also that we can look at and follow. So it's our job as board members to make sure these policies are out there, but we can't make people follow them, okay? So anyway, thank you.
I just, everything happens, they say, in life for a reason. I don't know if this is happening for a reason, but I like to be positive and look at things as opportunities. And whatever did or didn't happen yesterday, none of us can do anything about, but we can learn from it. So I'm very encouraged that that we have a policy draft that we can, or not a draft, but a policy in place that we can review. We can tweak it if we need to tweak it as a board. I would like to ask the congregation to have confidence in us that we definitely are taking everything seriously that is being raised in whatever context, and we will work together as a board group and team to do the right thing here. And if our policy needs to be refined, we will do so. So I think, again, I see this as an opportunity for us to grow and work together around an important issue. Thank you.
Hi, do I have to say my name? Hi, I'm Allison. In regards to the subject matter, I think it's great that the board is moving forward and there's continuing education being done, and tweaking of the policy is going to happen and all of that. However, in regards to the past perceived transgressions, there apparently is a policy, and I don't know what it is and how it defines harassment, but I'm assuming that maybe there are consequences or a policy about accountability, and is that going to be taking place now? Because ignorance is not, whatever the legal term is. Just because we didn't know about it, the board didn't know about it, doesn't mean it didn't happen, and that there shouldn't be something, accountability is being taken.
Absolutely. The first thing in the policy, and the first thing that did not happen, was supposed to be an independent investigation. That has never happened. Informally, I have learned that the person who was victimized said this was a quote. The person who has been accused has said, I never said it. I went back to the accuser and said, were there any witnesses? And there were none. But that's all informal, and that was within the last month or two, so way after the fact. It needed to have happened, certainly within 30 days, if not less, of the incident. So, and then the other incident that has been reported, the accuser said this was said. The other person said, I did not say that. And you would have been me. I would have been present when it was said. And I can tell you in that one, I never heard it said. So The main thing that we need to focus on is there should have been an investigation 30 days after. Because if we do an investigation at the time these things are done, and then the next thing it says after that is you bring in the accuser and the accused and you have them mediate. That has never been done. And if we could get more of this straightened out in the beginning, then I think it would help a lot with the things that get inflamed because they're not tended to at the time.
Okay, I understand. It sounds like you are directing it only towards what was in the report. But if there are other incidents that come up, is that going to be addressed?
Absolutely. It would start with an investigation immediately.
Even if it was in the past, whether, apparently it started July 2017.
Here's the thing, and I'm not saying that we won't. We would certainly look into it. But as you all know, there is a statute of limitations in law. The reason there is a statute of limitations in law is because memories fade. And that degrades your evidence. We will certainly look into it. Mm-hmm. But if the evidence is all, and Jan spoke at length about memories at the last meeting, about memory and how memory degrades and you rehearse your memories and so on. If it's just a matter of memory over this period of time, we can investigate it and say which each person remembers, but I'm not sure how much more we can do. And I think the main thing is for us all to commit to each other that we treat each other politely and professionally to the very best of our ability.
Absolutely. I mean,
and one thing that concerns me is that there's great emphasis on treating the minister respect and apparently very little emphasis on treating the board with respect. And I think everybody needs to be treated with respect. Every single person needs to be treated with respect.
That goes without saying.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to keep on going on, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think you are pointing towards the legal ramifications or the legal perspective. I'm talking about coming from us as a church community, and that healing needs to come about, and it's whether it's someone legally can provide accurate details or whatever doesn't mean that they weren't hurt. And I'd like to see some kind of accountability or investigation or a validation of what they felt and some kind of movement made towards healing that, whatever it may be.
We can certainly do that if it becomes formalized, these past events. We can certainly look into that. And if the parties agree, because you have to honor their privacy as well. If I'm accused of something incredibly heinous, even if it's not true, I'm not sure I want it made public. If someone accused me of waterboarding my wife, I'm not sure I would even want the accusation out there, much less what the findings were. So you have to respect, I think, to a certain extent, the privacies of both the accuser and the accused. And what also happens after the investigation, like I said, is bringing the parties in to try to come to a resolution. And I think that is an essential step that was missed. Because it just happened to me the other day. I said something about, I know what it was, that the board has designated me as the one person to talk to the council. And I thought I overheard something that somebody else had talked to the attorney. But the first thing I did was check it out and say, did I hear that correctly? And the third party said, no, that's not what was said at all. And that is the kind of healing that I think could have happened that didn't. If the one party said, I'm sure you said it, and the other party said, I'm sure I didn't, then maybe they could have worked out what was really going on at the time. And then, like other people say, well, but there are abuses that happen in private, and that is true. But what we all know is abuses that happen in private tend to, over time, be repeated again and again and again, which is what we're now finding with the Me Too movement. I may have abused this person 10 years ago, but then I also abused this person 8 years ago and 5 years ago. So we need to get these things on record, because even if it's a he said, she said, or a she said, and we start to see a pattern that this person consistently says, well, I didn't say it, and we've got 15 people coming forward, then we can take a look at that pattern. But that's why it's so important to get the investigation started and documented so that we can start having a record of these patterns. And then certainly, if we do find, I mean, to me, and I know that Bonita endorses this policy, it never hurts to give an apology. And I think if we encourage people to give apologies, even if they feel they didn't say it, it isn't going to hurt. You know, I'm sorry you heard that. I never said it, and I would never intend that. That keeps my dignity, and yet still acknowledges that whatever you heard hurt you and made you afraid. So yes, I think there's a whole lot more we can do. And then if we do find harassment, then we can take more serious measures.
I'd like to segue to some of this. First, I didn't catch your name. Do you mind? What is it? Allison. Hi, Allison. I'm Ricky. Thank you for your questions. I'm really trying to listen today with my third ear, as the saying goes. And I hear you. I definitely hear you. I respect everybody's perspective. When I worked for I was an HR manager for 14 years for the largest company in America, and we would sometimes get similar things. We would get, a situation brought to their attention where they'd say, somebody would make a complaint, and we would have to investigate, you understand. And sometimes they would be old situations, like maybe over 6 months, over a year, and if it got even over a year, I mean, it was so old, right? So to me, it's all about relationship. So no matter how old it was, and no matter how much we thought our hands were tied, management didn't have an obligation to look into anything until we become aware. Now, once we become aware, we had about 30 days to look into it, right? So Allison, we would sit down and we would talk to the parties. We would do like let's say it was an old situation. We couldn't really take a whole lot of action, but we did do what we called an intervention. And to me, what I want you to hear, it was about not just looking into it, but trying to build relationship, which to me is healing. So we would do the intervention, we would talk to each party, and then we would bring them in the room. And sometimes apologies maybe would have to be made, like you were talking about saying, I'm sorry. Sometimes forgivenesses would have to be done. Sometimes each party said, well, I didn't say it and I didn't say it. And we couldn't do anything. But the age of it, I don't know the law like Joanne and some other people do. My background's HR, but we did do something. And so I guess what I want everyone to hear is we do take all of this seriously. None of us want to hurt each other. I started crying when I heard about the police report, and I'm not named in it, but I'm really upset about it because I feel like, did it really have to come to that? Because if you snip at me today, what I should do, according to Unity Principles, is come talk to you. Because if I come talk to you and say, you know what, when you snipped at me today, it hurt me. Can we talk about it? What was going on with you? So I really want I want you to hear, and I'm going to shut up now. I want you to hear, we take it seriously. We're all hurting. Everybody in this church is hurting. We're all hurting, no matter what side of the fence we stand on. And I want to see us get back and closer to Unity Principles. I want to see us, regardless of what side of any issue we're on. It doesn't even matter. We all have hearts and we all care about Unity Principles. So I want to see us start getting to a place where we can ask ourselves, okay, here's the situation. Let's look at it as an opportunity. And how can I build better relationships around and in relation to this opportunity? Because if we do that, we're all going to come together as one. So thank you for caring, and thank you for your questions.
I'm sorry, I just want to get a definitive answer. I love the fact that you're saying, that intervention can happen and all of that. So is this going to happen for the past perceived transgressions? not just moving
I
forward?
think it should. Who should be answering that question? I mean, from my personal board perspective, I would love to see the people brought together and maybe they could talk it through and shake hands or hug and make up or whatever. I mean, even if we don't agree, we can still reconnect. That's what I want to have happen. So
Maybe
do you
you
want to
could talk
address
amongst
that,
yourselves
Joanne,
about
or-
that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Allison, thank you so much for your question and your concern. I'd like to get to specifics, okay? And I totally agree with you that closure and healing is important. Now, we'll talk generalities, but that specifically is still open, and it's not closed yet. So what I would highly recommend, well, my first question is, when you have an employee policy and you have an issue like this, who is responsible for initiating the investigation? Who is the day-to-day operator that should make the call and say, whoa, let's do an investigation? Who is that person?
According to the policy, it would be the senior minister.
Okay.
But
according-
however, since he's the accuser, then he would probably have to, I would think, recuse himself and come to the board and ask for direction.
Okay, so we've got a good start. And I highly agree that we should go into it. I really do. But we've got to do something. We just can't sit around and let it fester. But the really key point is the parties themselves need to come forward. And they need to come forward in a way that presents itself in a professional manner and is really driving towards resolution. That's what needs to happen. So I can't do that for other people. And no one can bring anybody else to consciousness either. We do it for ourselves. But I would like to have the structure there and have it be advertised. And then when it comes up, that people have the information and they be directed in an effective way that, hey, do this. Check with the minister. Let's do an investigation. And if it is the minister himself, obviously bring it to the board. We tweak it, okay, and we work on it. But it needs to be structured, and I don't see the structure here in the day-to-day operation. I really don't. It's sad to see, but it's a learning experience, okay? We all learn. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. As long as we learn, we don't lose. We move forward together. But I really would like to see closure on that issue, and I think that's what the foundation is to what you are speaking towards, okay? So if the parties are present and hear the concerns of the community and wish to proceed with this, let's do it.
And I just want to say I agree with Richard and Ricky, everyone. We do need closure, but if both parties are not willing to step forward, we have to think of another way to bring closure. You know that saying, if you see something, say something. And just because one party says, oh, I didn't do that, or denies it, I always believe in, just because you don't remember does not mean it did not happen. And that's part of the closure. We need to do something. Besides say something, we need to do something. But we're working on it, and that's it.
Yeah, I might add, we did have a meeting with Earls. First name David, Dale, Doug, Earls. David Earls. We did have a meeting with David Earls. He came in to talk with us and try to help with some of the board. David Earls is I don't even know what his honest background is, but he was into somewhat of relationships and working on relationships and trying to talk to us about some of the things that were going on, etc. And we did, to answer your question, we did approach some of it. There was some very heated exchange and got down to who said what, when did what get said from the two perspectives. We haven't done what we need to do of following up with that and pulling it all together. And I think that we do need to. We have been reeling to some degree, trying to figure out where do we go, what do we do first. When Reverend Tim decided to leave, it was what is the top priority at this particular point? We've got so many irons in the fire right now, trying to figure out what to do first, second, third, fourth, and to about 50th is a little bit difficult to do. Having said that, though, probably one of the most important pieces of what we need to do is to try to help with the healing process that is present, not only with the board, but also with the minister, but also with the congregation. And if we don't heal the things that are present here, which is a microcosm of here, which is a microcosm of here, which is a microcosm of the world, we're not going to be able to get where we need to go. And it's extremely important that all of the accusations that are present, and there are a number of them, get brought to light, and we really do work through those. They're not hidden. There are lots of people that have written memorandums for record or informational papers or you name it that have gone to UWM, that have come to the church. All of those need to be brought to light because lots of people have hurt. A lot of people that are hurting have felt intimidated to bring it forward because they have felt intimidated before and they're afraid. It's almost what you see in alcoholic families and in other kinds of issues. People decide not to bring things up because they're afraid to bring it up. And that needs to be brought up, needs to be brought up in the whole church so that all of us can try to heal what's going on. And I will tell you that's where I am.
And I will say that Nicholas Griffin, who's coming in, has developed a forum that he calls Heart Talk. And I can certainly ask him if he would be willing to do that with us. He said it's been very successful in the past.
I would appreciate some clarity as to the structure of this meeting. I do the title for it, and more importantly than that, is this a board talk or is it a Q&A? So when I heard that we are not to express our opinion in this forum, that kind of made me cringe. And there's a lot of sayings like, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that order. It's not a critique. It's just a suggestion to consider. So my yes or no question to the board is, could you reconsider the parameters and the format for this opportunity? Because as I understand the organizational chart, the board, the congregation is above the board, and this is our chance to express ourselves. This is kind of like a town hall, but we're trying to have it more regularly. And I think everyone here, when we look at the ratio of we're not allowed to express our opinion, but all of you get to answer the question in your time frame and your rate. And I want to close it with saying I greatly appreciate all the hard work that this board does. So this is not meant as a critique. I know that you work your butts off. You work more hours and have had more meetings than probably any other board in the history of this church, to the best of my knowledge. But I would appreciate, and it's a rhetorical yes or no question, would you reconsider the format of this so that we can have our voice?
I think Allison has already demonstrated that we are willing to reconsider that format. She asked a series of questions until she felt she had clarity, and she was able, through her questions, to express her opinion. What I do not want to have happen is what I saw in the last one, where people got heated and expressed opinions that were completely unrelated to the questions. And we are willing to come here, but as you've indicated, we're a very hardworking board. And even if you doubled our salary, we're still not working for zero. We did not, any of us, sign up for this. He's saying, calm down. We did not, any of us, sign up for this so that we could be a target. In fact, one board member said, I'm afraid to sit at this table because won't it just be target practice again? Which is what we saw way too often under other administrations. Okay, so that's what I want to make clear. If it is a genuine dialogue, I'm all in favor of it. But if I'm just going to be bashed, or any member of the board is going to be bashed, I am not interested in participating in that. So the extent to which it is a dialogue is the extent to which we both listen and ask and stay in our heart space.
Okay, Sean, can I ask?
If I could just add, I believe, was it the last meeting we had a moderator with Margie? Yes. I think that was a good thing and could be implemented again.
Okay, I just had a follow-up question. I'm trying to seek to understand what it is that you're actually looking for. But no, I do get paid, and it's all in spiritual growth. So I got a bucket load of that, and every board member's got the very same thing going. So here's what I'm thinking. The format that you're looking for sounds more like a town hall to me, okay, where people get up and they give their opinions. This is the first pure board talk that we've had. The last meeting was a hybrid. It started off as town hall, and then it ended up as board talk. But what is it that you'd like to see? What is the format? You just said mediated or facilitated. Is there something beyond that you'd like to see? You'd like to see people have an open mind?
I think this is turning into a town hall. I mean, and there's no parameters around there. You talk about procedures and policies, but a parameter in town hall, we're allowed to express our opinion. We're going to have these every Sunday, but we're not allowed to express our opinion until once a month.
Well,
It sort of defeats some of the purpose of this.
I personally don't like the term no opinions myself.
That's what I heard.
There are ways to get opinions across, but here's what I'm thinking board talk is about, okay? And there's different forums for different levels of communication, but board talk is about people knowing information about what's going on in the church. So that's important, that everybody, the constituency, is well informed, okay? So we can share that information. Now, I noticed that Reverend Tim, on his Tuesday night, was it January 15th, when he had a forum for himself to express, he did not allow people to get up on what he called their soapbox, okay? So, and he held it to Q&A also. So our format here is actually similar to that.
It doesn't mean that that's the right format.
Format and forum. Okay, so I agree there should be a forum for that, and I'm thinking that may be town hall. Now, as I think Joanne artfully mentioned, you can get your opinion in just by the manner of questions that are being asked. But I look forward to sharing information with people. People can give their opinions, but just because they're saying something doesn't mean it's true, okay? And what I'm really interested in is not so much what their opinion is. I'm interested in the information that they have to go with that opinion. That's what I'd like to hear. And then I'll decide for myself. And that's critical thinking skills that I think would really help the community at large to develop that style of thinking. So opinions, okay. But for me, this is board talk, information, town hall, get up, soapbox, give opinions. I don't know if it has really been healthy for the church to follow that kind of a forum where there's anger and frustration expressed. I think it drives people away. But share the information, let people come to their own opinions. That's the direction I would come from.
Let me ask a question, if I can. Most of the time, communication, if people are communicating, they really just want to be heard, and they want to be able to make a point. They want to be able to be heard, to be able to be listened to be able to be understood. The board likewise wants to be understood. They want to be heard, etc. I'll tell you that as far as I'm concerned, and I may be one of a minority, I am more than willing to listen to any questions, any hurt, any feelings, anything that we all as a congregation have to say. I am more than willing to do that. Because if we can't do that, we will never be able to communicate, to commune, to be able to work together collaboratively with love, with understanding. Okay? So I don't mind at all. I would be more than happy to answer any of those. We just need to make sure when we do it that, as you say, we do it with a gentle, loving heart so that we're not attacking, because microaggression on both sides is something that we need to be working on, because that's what we're concerned about.
That's why I agree with the moderator too. I don't want to see it get heated and anger and frustration, and you shouldn't be the subject of pot shots, or that's not my intention. I want the high level, everyone to be on that high level road, and I think the moderator can help us do that. And I want to sit down because people allowed me to speak in front of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I also wanted to say something. I agree with what Thomas says. I am very aware. I know that we are here to listen to what the congregation has to say, and but also ask that we all, from the board as well, try to listen to one another. And I think that the board, I can't speak for everybody. I will speak only for myself, is that I'm looking to hear what the congregation has to say, to hear what your concerns are. And I believe that is why we're all here today. So we hope that we get to hear all of the voices that are here. I know that we are a very diverse community, and that there are many variations on the questions that can come up today. So I'm watching faces and reactions to, and they're all very different. So I think that we all have something very valuable to say, and thank you for your concern and for your taking your time out to be here today as well.
I just want to say one thing to you guys. There's something, for anybody that studies neurology brain research, there's something called curiosity questions, and I'll say it really briefly. The reason questions are so important to personal growth is when, let's say you've got a group of people that are arguing. When they're arguing, their brains are actually producing the chemicals of cortisol. And when our brains are producing cortisol, like for example, if Salim were to attack me, my brain will immediately produce cortisol, immediately. Whether he's asking a question or not, the attack would cause my brain to produce cortisol. However, if Salim reapproached it in a different way and asked what's called a curiosity question, to still raise the issues, by the way, and still get the issues out on the table, the brain literally starts producing something called oxytocin. And when the brain, and the reason this is important is when the brain produces oxytocin and we're in conversation with one another, I feel safe. When my brain produces cortisol, I don't feel safe and I want to run away. Why is that important for us? It's really important. I like Q&A because it gets to your curiosity questions. And if you ask a curiosity question, it gives us the chance to respond to you in an elevated way, so we're not stuck in the sort of lower level attack mode. There's a great book called Conversational Intelligence that you can read if you're interested in studying and learning about this, but this stuff works, and that's why a question and answer format can be valuable if we're trying to get the issues out on the table, because it promotes creativity, and when I begin to create with Salim, I'm building relationship with Salim and going more toward unity principles and more toward an elevated form of conversation. Words build worlds, and how we talk to each other and even the kinds of curiosity questions we ask matter. And asking those curiosity questions can actually help us build connections with each other that we didn't have before. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important. We've told you we wanted to listen to you guys. So I think it's important that we move on to questions so that you guys can ask us the questions that you want to ask.
I have several points of information, and I also have a question. So I don't want to use my time with the points of information. I still want to be able to ask my question. So do I ask my question? Is it,
Give your thoughts.
Okay.
Talk to us.
Okay, it seems to me that this is separate from what we started 2 weeks ago with the board talk. And now it's all about, it appears to me to be all about defensive mechanisms on the part of the two named people. And 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the Me Too movement, in which people, women and men, don't bring up the abuse at the moment. Obviously, they might be afraid or whatever reason. So now again, it seems like that's negating that point of information that we established last time. So those are my concerns, that we are actually continuing, which would have started with the questions 3, 4, and 5, and then come back. So, okay. So should I ask my question now? It's off the topic. Okay. My question is, I want to know what is in the election committee and what the nominating committee policies are. I looked online, they're not available, and I looked in the office, and they are not available in the policy book. So I would like to know what those policies are, where I can see them and read them, and who are on the committees.
Let me tell you real quickly. I'll answer your question with regards to whichever one I'm on, the nominating committee. The nominating committee is supposed to have, and it did have, 2 people from the congregation that were elected at the last meeting. The 2 people that were on that one from the congregation both tendered resignations because they didn't feel that they could ask, from what I understand, the questions that they felt that they needed to ask in the vetting process. Whether that's a truthful statement or not, it's the opinion that was brought to me by the 2 individuals that were on from the congregation. Thus, there were the 2 congregants, Reverend Tim, and the board person that ended up volunteering to be on the nominations committee. At present, I am the one that volunteered from the board to be on the nominating committee. So I am it from the board. Reverend Tim has got 1 more week, and then he will be gone. So there, at the end of next week, I'm the only person left on the nominating committee. We took that to some degree to Andy Bunn, who is the church's attorney, to ask him, what do we do? Andy, when he looked through our bylaws, says, it looks to me like you guys are stuck at present because the bylaws are written up to be done in a particular manner. And so it sounded like to him, by his review of the bylaws, that getting additional people from the congregation on, believe me, I would love to have on the nominating committee, was not going to be doable based on the bylaws that the church currently has. Is that correct? So I'm stuck, and I feel very, very vulnerable at this point because now you guys have got 1 person to aim your ammunition at, and I feel like I'm completely naked in front of everybody because everything that's going to happen is going to be my fault. And so I just want people to know I don't know what to do about it, but that's the nominating committee. The elections committee is not my ball of wax. It is Kathy Whitmire's and others. Linda Wong is currently chair of that one, but who else has been working on that?
I have been working on it somewhat. Jim is a member, and I am their ex officio. And in terms of nominating committee, the senior minister is ex officio, so Nicholas Griffin can help you.
Good.
Okay.
I still haven't heard about where the policies are. I'd like to read them and get copies of them.
Yeah, they're supposed to, all of that is supposed to be at the front desk.
It's not.
I looked also, they don't
Yeah.
exist. And so that is a job that the board is supposed to, as soon as a policy gets written, it's supposed to be put into the booklet. I will make sure that that gets done, correct?
Well,
That will
another
be in.
question is, how can we proceed with the election if the congregation who essentially employs the board by voting for them is not forthcoming with these policies?
The policies would be attached to the minutes, right? As we adopted them. So you can
December
always
minutes?
go online and look for the policies, which are supposed to be online as soon as we approve them.
They are not, though. They are not.
No. Okay, I guess not. We can easily get you copies. Let's not get mired down in what happened. We can easily get you copies. I know the committee is working, reading assiduously what has been made. So we can get you copies, and I will forward it separately to Johanna, since we are caught up in if it's attached to the December minutes. So we'll do
December?
it that way.
How
The
can-
December 6th minutes have not yet been approved.
And that this information is going to govern the election that is in March?
What governs the election is the bylaws, which are public. These are procedures to make that happen, and I will send you those procedures. Plus, the election committee, which meets every Monday at 4, has been open. You're certainly free to come there. I will come and make sure I have a copy of the bylaws. I know Linda Wong, not the bylaws, the procedure. Linda Wong always shows up with her copy, and so does Kathy Whitmire. So if I cannot get it to you between now and tomorrow at 4, you can certainly come to the meeting and pick up a copy then. We'll make you one.
I'm not interested in just for myself. I'm interested for the other people that want to know what's going on for the nominating committee and the
And I think
election
I
committee.
responded to that. I will get it to Johanna Kelly,
so
who can post it.
Good. And then we can read it and have questions at the
Yes,
town hall.
And I believe it was your policy, and did you forward it to Tim for transmission?
Well, it was a policy that was passed by the board on December 6th. And it should be in the record, in the minutes, and that's where it should be. Now, I hear it's not, but what I'd like to say
correct.
is,
That's correct.
Linda, I
It's
can solve
not.
your problem. See me after the meeting. I've got a copy right here. You can photograph it. You
It's
can have
not-
a copy today. Now,
Excuse
in
me, I want to
addition-
respond to that. It's not my problem.
Can we
and-
respectfully let each person finish, please?
Yeah, I really would like to be heard. Thank you. So I can provide you with a personal copy right now on the spot, or anybody else. The second part of your question was, who are the members of the election committee? Will the members of the election committee please stand? We do have some here today. Okay, so Jim and Bev. And there's others on that committee too. I mean, Linda Wong is a member. And Kathy Whitmire. And who else? I think there's 2 more. Plus Jan Holt, okay. Pat Holt and Alice Rogers. So those are the members. And we have 2 ex officio members also. That is Joanne and Reverend Tim. I can't hear you. Oh, Cindy Hensley. Okay. So those are the members of the committee. I can provide you with a copy on the spot right after the meeting if you can photo it. But how are we going to get, and what is the committee doing in order to get that election procedure out? Because your point is well taken. People need to be informed. So this is part of, I assume, a board process. Ideally, it would be up on the website and everybody could have a view of it. So the question is, when will it be available on the website? When will it be available in the office? Ideally, we would have a policy and procedure manual in the office, and this has come up before. But who administratively administers that and puts the policy in a file and makes it available at the front desk for people to come in and look at? Whose responsibility is that?
So
And maybe we should take a look at that.
Just to clean that one, Richard, can you make a copy and put it in the policy book today?
Well, my copy is all lined and circled, so no, it's not a clean copy. But she has
You
a
have a
record.
clean copy?
Yeah.
So, Debbie, can you put it in? If you want to send it to me, I'll certainly come back and put it in today.
Where is the book?
It's behind the desk.
It's behind the desk
underneath,
at the front desk.
Which desk?
Front
in
desk.
the reception
receptionist
desk.
Reception desk.
Yes,
Okay.
it's
and
about this wide, very
okay.
attractive.
It's good to know. Thank
It's
you.
easy to find. I
I'm
mean,
glad
it's
to
big.
hear it's there now.
It's a big.
It's empty,
4-inch.
but it's there.
So is that policy in that book right now?
No,
No.
it
And
does
then
not
my
exist in
question
it.
is, why and what can we do about it? This is December 6th now.
Gotcha.
So how can we work with that?
Yeah, gotcha.
Thank you.
I was under the impression with the past policies that I've done, I would transmit them to the senior minister. So I was assuming that he was updating that notebook. If that has not been happening, then the board, I guess, will assume the function.
It is my understanding that this is the first year that the board has authorized an elections committee. So this is all new stuff, and mistakes happen. So, but we're doing our best, and next year will go a lot smoother. My question is definitely a curiosity question. What is the relationship between the church and the preschool? It has always been my understanding that the preschool does what it does. It teaches the kids. It's aligned with unity, and it teaches unity principles. But other than that, they do their thing, and so long as they're within the law and they pay us what they're supposed to pay us, we leave them alone. And yet there was a letter sent out in November asking the parents for confidential information and stuff, which a lot of people got upset with. Who sent the letter? Why was it sent? Or does anybody know? And what specifically is the relationship between the preschool and the church?
I would like to answer that one. It has come to our attention that the preschool is a ministry of the church. That means that the board is responsible for the preschool. Therefore, the board needs the information necessary to make sure that the preschool is running as should be. It doesn't mean we think anything's wrong. It just means we didn't know. Now that we know, we're doing our best to get the information and to review it as we should. We have established a school committee, which that was a couple weeks ago, hasn't met yet, but and that committee is established to look at the situation and what needs to be done, who should be on the committee, what should the committee's function be, and so forth. At this time, it's just 2 members of the board and the senior minister, but that's until we figure out what we're going to do and how it's going to operate. And at the least, there will be, representation from the preschool or or communication with the preschool. If the preschool has a different organization committee to speak with us, that will be fine. So basically, nothing has been established at this point.
Okay, it was my understanding that when the Unity Preschool was started way back in the 70s, and a committee dealing with the school was only started 2 weeks ago. So what happened to in the other 45 years? I mean, they seem to be doing fine without one for all that time, so why is there a change?
There is a change because it has come to our attention that the preschool is a mission of the church, and therefore the board is responsible for it.
If you want, I'll stand up so you can see me a little easier. If you want some of the legal parts of it, the preschool does not have a tax-exempt status on its own. The church has a tax-exempt status. by being a mission of the church, the preschool being a mission of the church, they reside under the church. If the preschool were to decide that they wanted to be an independent organization, they would have to file everything on their own. They would have to go through the process of being a tax-exempt status if they wanted to be a tax-exempt status. Just as we did for the Endowment Foundation, we started a 509A3, which is different than the 501c3 that the church is, and that probably meant nothing to you other than to let you know that you got to follow the rules that exist, and the school, by where it resides under the church. The church, for many, many years, has had a blind eye to the school, and we have not done a lot of the things that the church was really responsible for, and there is a desire to try to figure out what is the legal responsibilities that the church has to protect the school and for the school to be able to reside within. So it's not trying to be a punitive or anything else process. We, as a board, probably did not do our desire of getting things cleaned up in quite the manner that we should have. And had we been more collaborative and more open and more generous and more communicative, rather than putting a hard line of this is what's going to happen, most of this would have never come up and would have never been an issue. But Reverend Tim's talk today was one on, do we love power, or are we going to have power to love? And then it kind of gets around to some of what is happening with the preschool. And I spoke too much, but just know that that's where I'm coming from.
Let me say, too, that one of the reasons it came to such focus this year is because we received a letter from the Attorney General, who became aware that the school was legally part of our church. And when they had investigated the church before, the school was never mentioned. Oops, $1.5 million oversight. That's why they were very curious. And in that April letter, most of the documents that were requested were around the school, this entity that had not been described to them before. So that's why there is all of a sudden heightened attention on the relationship between the school and the church, is because the Attorney General has brought that into focus. So the financial statements where we thought as a church we were complying with what the state wanted, we were not complying, because our financial statement should be a consolidated statement of both the church and the school. See? So that's what we're trying to work out now, is that integration, and that's exactly where we are in the 2015 independent review, is the school will say, we gave you this, and we said we received that, and the numbers don't match. Well, how come they don't match? And trying to get that all straightened out to get us to the point where we can present a consolidated financial statement. I have not heard anyone on this board, past, present, or future, when I was out there in the audience or on the board, that has ever indicated that we want to interfere with the incredibly successful operation of the school. So if there are people who are concerned that this board attention is about trying to take over the school, believe me, it is not. It's about trying to get as a corporation, our act together to properly report what is going on. Okay? I really believe in that motto, don't mess with success, and they're very successful.
Yeah,
Thank you. Just real briefly, again, this is another opportunity because we've got a couple tracks going on. We're trying to get compliant, as Joanne said, with the financials, and that's just the right thing to do. So we need your support and understanding and helping us and supporting that. But it's also an opportunity. I'd like to, over the years, I've only been here 8 years, so I don't know what happened before that. But there clearly was a division, I think because the school was just sort of allowed to operate more on its own. So we need a cultural shift. I'd like to see us have some parties. I'd like to see us come together. Let's have some parties with the school and build relationships. Thank you.
Yeah, so in answer to Jim's question also, church and preschool on their own, no, definitely not. Although we're really driving towards running it more professionally, especially now that the Attorney General is involved. We have to get financial reports to the AG's office, and we haven't been able to gain access to the school's financial data to the level of which we need to fill out those reports. And that has been an ongoing issue for how many months now? Over a year. So our treasurer has not been able to gain access to that financial data. So it really raises a question as to why not. But we're working on that. And that's the single biggest bone of contention right now within this entire church. And there's a lot of things that are dovetail off of that one issue. We need a treasurer that can walk in, look at the books, and fill out those reports. But she can also, she's a CPA, and she can also help clean up the books, because the church's books, and from what we have seen, or she has indicated seen in the church information, financial information that she has so far, is there's a lot of pukas and a lot of questions. So it's up to the board, the fiduciary responsibility of the board, who is legally responsible, to get those reports out. And we need that information. So we need to pursue that. And it's not about telling the school how to do its thing. It truly is about, let's get these financial reports out. That's the foundation of it. Thank you.
Elaine, go ahead.
Yeah, my concern is about the preschool also. I understand trying to get the financial statements and all that information from the school. My concern, though, is the board decided or insisted that they wanted access to confidential information from the preschool parents. Okay, so it got to a point where they wanted financial and personal information of the preschool parents. I can see asking about the school and the operating expenses of the school. And that rose concern by the parents about having to divulge this information. And they were said that they needed to sign a consent, and they did not consent to the board having access to this personal and private information about the parents, then their children would not be able to re-enroll back in the school. That is my concern. Now, I understand also that the accountant who does the church books and the audits, now he said he does not need most of the information, the personal and financial information of the parents. So if he doesn't need that for his financial reports, why is the board insisting they need all this information from the preschool parents?
I got it.
I'm asking a question, so, I'd like an explanation, because my question is why?
Okay. Why was because the financial information could not be separated from the personal information when this all started, because of the way the QuickBooks was set up. They've been working on changing that, and my understanding is that as of January, they are separate. They've got a number to identify the students, so we don't get any of that. The problem being that we're trying to do the independent review for 2015, 16, and 17, when all of that is connected. This church, the board does not feel that it needs that information. The board is inadvertently exposed to that information. And that was the reason that the consent was needed. The letter that went out from Sergio, and perhaps I believe that his attorney, the board had not seen the letter. And I assure you, if I had seen that letter, I would have insisted on some changes, because we never intended for people to not be able to keep their children in the school. Legally, I guess, if they didn't sign the consent, then they couldn't re-enroll. But then when we realized that that was what was being put out, that was what would have to happen, we created a policy that said that if anyone did not want to sign that consent form, then we could redact their information on a case-by-case basis. So
You folks spoke with Sergio after seeing that letter that went out and saying that that is not the policy or the stance of the board, that the children would not be disenrolled because the parents did not sign the consent form?
yes,
Okay, so this matter has been taken care of.
Yes.
And so you said the information going back to 2015 and 16 is where there's some information in there that has not been redacted. So, but that doesn't
No.
apply to the students that are enrolled now. That would be past history, past information.
yeah, it's not the information hadn't been, well, I mean, the information hadn't been redacted. The thing is that the information was included with the financial information, that they didn't separate it. So now it's been separated by giving each student an ID number, and that's the way it always should have been, but it wasn't.
Okay.
And because that change is only being made now, that means that for 2015, 16, 17, and 18, we have to deal with the fact that it's not separate.
Okay, but going forward, there should be none of this issue going forward where the students would be disenrolled because the parents did not sign the consent form.
Yeah, disenrollment is off the table.
Okay.
That was taken care of in January.
Thank you
I
very
mean, in
much. That was my
December,
concern.
Whenever.
Thank you.
It was because the change in the manual took place mid-year. That's why we had to let the parents know that there was a change. And that was attorney recommended by a reading of the statute. And it was an interaction of 2 or 3 different statutes. And the reading of the statute, according to the attorney, was that we had the right to this information because the manual had statements that certain information would not be released. We were changing the manual because we did have the right to that information. Disenrollment was never talked about. And actually, consent is the wrong word. What should have been used is we acknowledge the change in the policy. And that whole consent thing made it difficult. The other thing that where it really changed because of the disenrollment is the board, if the parents did not agree that the data would be shared as required by law to this change, then our attorney said, well, and if they don't agree with it, they'll have to go someplace else because this is now our policy. That somehow got changed to a disenrollment and pulling them out mid-year. That was never discussed with the board, and as Jan already indicated, and I've got proof of that, the letter went out, and then we were sent a copy of the letter. So that whole disenrollment concept was never brought up by the board, and as soon as it was brought to our attention, it was rectified. Now there is, I don't want people to get a misnomer, there are still times, very limited. Well, let me back up, because there's one thing you said, and to me it was overly broad, and I want to make sure that that's clarified. We don't care about the parents' financial status in general, which is what your question implied. All we care about is the money coming in and out from the parents. So we're not going and saying how much is in your savings account. We don't care, but we need to know about the money going in and out. So I want to make sure that that's properly contained. Yeah.
I have a follow-up on that because I attended the board meeting, I think it was in December, that was held in here because there were so many parents here concerned. And I heard Jan say that the board never said, or it wasn't the board's position that, and maybe the problem is disenrollment and discontinuation are 2 different things. But I sat here and heard Kathy say that if parents did not sign that, like right away, like there was a push to do this, like by December 1st, maybe it's very late November, and then it was postponed until January 1st when I know that there was a motion that was defeated by the board to postpone it till June 1st, because if somebody, you could say, well, we're not pulling you out this week, but if you can't keep your child enrolled in the 2nd semester, that's huge, because parents, they have no place to go to find another preschool for their children at the end of December to start January 1st. So saying you can't continue, next month is the same as basically saying you have to sign now or your child is out, even though we know that this is causing problems because you can't go anywhere else. And there was no flexibility on the board to postpone it until June, when the new policy manual would be put out, and they could know in advance to decide whether they wanted to acknowledge it or whether they wanted to withdraw their child. And of course, we don't want children withdrawn anyway. So what Jan said was inconsistent with what I heard Kathy say right up here.
What Kathy was reflecting at the time was what went out in the letter, and at that meeting, the board passed a motion saying that no child will be disenrolled.
So does that mean that they could continue in January for the second semester?
Correct.
Yeah, even if the parent didn't?
Correct. And then, as you have indicated, in September, the manual will be updated, and they will enroll or not enroll based on whether they agree with what's in the manual.
Okay, that is not what I remember happening at the meeting about changing that policy. But
Are those minutes posted?
okay, that's all right. I'll go look at them. Well, why were there so many parents still upset if this had been resolved because they didn't have to acknowledge it and they didn't have to have their children taken out?
They were upset in the morning session because it had not been resolved. By the grace of God, we had a board meeting that very night.
Okay.
So we were able to address the concerns from the morning session in the evening session.
Okay.
And I'm not sure of the percentage, but many of the parents that came in the evening may or may not have gotten the word that this was going to be addressed at the evening Board of Trustees meeting. So some of them were there, I think, because they thought the policy was not going to be fixed, and other of them probably came to see whether we were going to be true to our word and fix it. I don't know, but it was
At the last board talk 2 weeks ago, there were two sets of parents here who wanted to ask questions, and of course, it went till almost 5, so that was postponed till today. And I don't know what they wanted to ask about, but I certainly thought it was some concern about the board's actions and how it affected them and their children or the school. So I don't know, but I don't know that all of the problems or the concerns of the parents have really been completely addressed. But if they have been, that's great.
Well, just one more tidbit of information on that, and that is that I don't recall the board ever being involved in any conversations of disenrolling children. We leave that to the preschool. Those letters went out. Sally, those letters went out. We had no prior knowledge of that. What our consul did do, the attorney, and we spent about $1,000 a page for his opinion to get that opinion, was to suggest and say that the school handbook did not cover and said something different about the personal information, or it wasn't adequately covered. So he said, have parents acknowledge. I don't believe it was even a consent form, but it was an acknowledgement that under the law, their personal information is available, okay? But the board I haven't seen any personal information. It's not part of our daily, everyday business. It's nothing, that kind of, the school director has somehow managed to embed personal information with the financial information, and it's been a year and a half. It's been a long time since we've been trying to get this information. And the call was always, well, you can't have the personal information of the children because he had some kind of state thing that he looked at. Well, our attorney looked at it and said, no, this is the state statutes govern. Just make it clear to the parents, have them sign an acknowledgement form. And we're done with this. So this whole thing really created a firestorm, and it was not generated by the board. We're simply trying to get financial information that, as Jan has nicely pointed out, is the school has kept its records and embedded personal information. We don't want that personal information. We just want the finances and to get the reports out to the AG so that everybody knows what's happening with the money in the school.
Yeah, I think we may have beaten that horse to death. Is that okay if we move to a next question? Are you guys okay with moving
on? First, I want to thank you all for being here and coming in this format. I think it's really helpful for you to be able to see everyone's faces and for us to be able to see your faces, so thank you. And I also wanted to thank you, Joanne, for letting the meeting at the last, I think it was town hall, continue going, even though it was a difficult conversation. It's the first time I've seen this community have the opportunity to feel complete in a conversation. So thank you for that. I'm a little unsure of where to begin because these are difficult conversations. One thing that I would like to mention, because you talked about the lack of policies and procedures or being aware of the policy and procedures. We have in the past had many long-term staff members that had a good awareness of what the procedures were. And my understanding is that many of those people have resigned directly because of members of this board or actions of this board where they felt unheard or disrespected. So that's just something to take into account. It's important to talk with the staff and get their input on things. Let's see. I also wanted to ask you if the financial statements that the state is requiring, does that also require the personal identifying information of the, no, okay. I think one of the other issues that's not being addressed is that perhaps some of the reason that the parents might be concerned, as previous staff members, myself included, have been concerned, is that our personal identifying information was exposed and was removed from this campus on an unsecured laptop, which was not okay with many of us. And I was at a board meeting where the board seemed to think it wasn't a big deal. They didn't take it seriously. And now you're talking about exposing previous preschool parents' information because it hasn't been reformatted in this new way. So my question would be, why do we not also reformat the other information to redact it? Because I can understand the violation of trust. I do think that's an issue. So I'll let you go ahead and address that.
Well, let me do what I can do here. And you can kill the messenger if you want to. It's fine, just shoot arrows. But I will tell you that in full transparency, the board has not done what it needs to do of making sure that personal information does not make its way off campus. And I can tell you that I have personal knowledge that that information made its way off campus less than 2 weeks ago. And I can tell you that it happens. It happens because somebody puts a thumb drive in a pocket and ends up getting home with it and realizes that it's in a pocket. It's unacceptable. It should never happen. And we've got, from the board's end, got to fix the fact that personal information is finding its way off campus. And I want you guys to help push that issue so that we do our jobs of making sure it's not happening anymore. Thank you.
I do think, as we all know, that it would be much better if we had this information centralized, quite frankly, and in a secure area with remote access where the data stays where it is and is secure, and there would just be remote access as needed. I have wondered for a long time, and this is just me, I am not reflecting any of the positions other than mine. I have not understood why, if we are so happy with Stephen Lee CPA, that we don't have all the data with Stephen Lee CPA and then move the whole kit and caboodle to an online interface with QuickBooks. That was offered, that was his original suggestion, is to put the entire church on online QuickBooks. I think that's the direction in which we need to be moving because, it's so much easier to let technology work where technology works rather than us frisking people for disk drives and so on and so forth and inadvertencies. So I think, as Thomas says, we need your support in this, that we move forward in addressing a consolidated professional approach to our accounting where all the data are resident in a secured area and only remote access is allowed on an inquiry basis only.
And that will be fairly easy to do. Initially, the rationale was that the most expensive CPA that we interviewed wanted to do it completely remotely so that nobody was doing anything other than doing it in online access. There was concern that the staff may not be ready to take all of that on at the time because there were a lot of changes that were happening. Decision was made at the board level not to push the issue, to do one step at a time. I think we're ready to move to step 2 so that we can make sure that none of this is happening outside of the off campus.
Okay, I'm going to try to figure out the best way to say this delicately. I think there are often larger issues that go on, and we try to talk about them very carefully and respectfully, and that's necessary. I think another concern was the possibility that this unsecured information that deals with children's addresses could possibly be exposed to a registered sex offender. And that's not acceptable. So I don't know how that is to be addressed, but
yeah, I think it's an issue that the board's going to have to address, and we're going to have to get there.
And to make it clear, the person who's currently authorized to access the data is not a registered sex offender.
yes, but the computer was unsecured at the home of a.
That's going to take us places that are irrelevant, frankly, to current board action. Anytime you mention that word, so please, let's just not and move forward.
Okay, so I'm clear hearing that we're not going to be talking about that.
I already indicated what I thought was the best solution, which is to move it all centrally under Stephen Lee CPA with remote access only. And then you would have all of that information password protected.
Okay. I don't feel like that addresses the previous concerns. I do think that that's a wonderful step, and that's probably the right thing to do. I will say that the parents that were here at that meeting that showed up for the question and answer session came up to me and said, thank you for talking about accountability. They were very upset that they didn't feel like there was any accountability for what was going on here, which is what I have been talking about. I did not go up to them, they came up to me. So I just want you to hear that they came to me to thank me for talking about accountability, which is what they're looking for, and which I think a lot of the membership is looking for.
There's unfortunately nothing we can do about the past.
But what's happening now? If the system hasn't been set up, the new one, is there still an unsecured computer that hasn't been?
I don't think that's happening anymore.
To the best of my knowledge, the one computer that had that information on it is no longer extant. It has completely died and has been destroyed.
Okay. The other question I would have.
Chris, I just want to say one more thing.
Yes, Rick.
Every single issue that you and others have brought up, I take totally seriously, and I definitely hear you, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So I understand your concerns. We, as a board body, I believe, are taking all of this very seriously, and to me, the answer is putting a proper system in place, like Joanne was saying. We need to do that. Why it's taken so long, I'm not sure. In my professional opinion, it's taken too long. But I want to assure everybody that as far as we know, there's no nefarious motives going on. If anybody did, and I don't even know if anybody took a thumb drive home inadvertently, I've done that myself at jobs by accident, had something in my pocket and went and got home and thought, oh no, I've got this in my bag or whatever. So I want to assure everybody, I personally and professionally don't believe that there's any untoward or nefarious motives going on about your data. I think we're all human and we need to give each other the benefit of the doubt and have confidence in us that we are trying to work together to come up with a solution that makes sense for all parties, especially the Unity School and protection of the data. I have a clinical background and a clinical license, and I take personal identifying information very seriously. But there's been no mishaps with anything. There's been no. I just want you to trust us a little that we're trying to work toward the right solution here as quickly as possible. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but you would have no idea of knowing if there had been any mishaps if it was on an unsecured computer. That means that there's no virus protection, there's nothing. Someone can remotely access that machine.
What I would like for us to do as a board, and I'm doing something that I probably shouldn't do, and that is asking the board if we can bring this up and have a resolution to what we're going to have for a policy by April. Would that be okay with the congregation if we find a solution, try our best to bring things up, get it back to the congregation, because you guys need to know what the policy is that we are considering so that you can do input and let us know whether it's acceptable to you as well, for us to try to implement and have a policy in place within 60 to 90. 60 days would be February, March, April, a tax day. Whatever you want to do, but let's do a 60-day and we're going to try to get it fixed.
So what I would like to do and recommend is that we put this on our agenda for our next meeting. February. Yeah, if we can squeeze that in.
It does not, technically, it does not meet an emergency definition, and only emergency information can be added at this point to the agenda.
Okay, I would like to go on record that I have made the request. And in that process, we did have a committee about a year and a half ago regarding personal information. The committee kind of fizzled. We got real busy with a whole bunch of other stuff. So this may well go to a committee. So if anybody here is interested, raise your hand. I mean, we need people to help out. There's a lot of logistics, there's a lot of legwork. Be part of the process. The board just doesn't go to meetings and do stuff in meetings. Often it's done in committee level work. So if anybody has expertise, I would advocate that we do form a committee. And if someone here, and I do prefer that people in the community chair those committees rather than board members chair those committees. But whoever they are, someone that's got a little manao, some background in these areas would be very helpful, or even ideas. So as yourself, if you'd like to participate in some form of committee, I'd be more than happy to see that. And I do want to see all these I's get dotted and T's get crossed, but we have so much work to do. We can't do everything. And what's really interesting is that most of the committees are board members, and we do have outside people involved in some of them. But not a lot. So whether it's the Election Procedures Committee or the Bylaws Committee, which are both ones that I've been very much involved with, or we have a fundraising committees and things like that, but the participation has been really low, in my opinion. And Reverend Tim was talking to the lack of volunteerism in the church. So please, you want all this, I want it too. We got to get to it, but if you can jump on board and help out, it certainly would be appreciated.
So, again, if in order to make this an emergent issue, will you give us a show of hands as to whether you think this needs to be brought up as an emergent issue? Those of you that don't feel that it's an emergent issue, I think it's an emergent issue.
Okay, I just want to let you know it wasn't that I was necessarily being stubborn, but the definition of emergency was not known at the last prior meeting, and this has been known. That's why I was saying this isn't an emergency. We'll just decide with the board now that whether or not your opinion is enough to change the definition, and we'll take that up at the next meeting. I'll add it to the agenda.
And do we have volunteers?
I'm sorry, when it comes to the board meeting, what is in charge of the policies and the bylaws for the board? We will take it into account and consider it, but that's what I am responding to, is a policy that the board adopted.
And since we're going to be doing this at the next meeting, we may well form a committee. Is there anybody here that wants to serve on that committee? Can I see?
More than likely, I can be on that committee. Yeah, what's the...
Well, we haven't named it yet, but it involves Chris's data security. Call it the Data Security Committee.
A data security.
Okay. Is there anybody here?
Joanne Lewis? Anybody else in IT?
The board places people on the committee, so we can appoint you at this very next meeting if you want to.
Joanne?
Okay.
Johanna wants to. Ralph, do you want to be on it from IT standpoint? Ralph wants on it. Okay, so we got 3 congregate. Rodney wants on it, so that'd be 4 from a congregate. Thank you. Thank you, guys. And Chris, I'm sorry, you're standing.
Yes.
Thank you very much, because to me, this is the future of the church when everybody gets involved, and we can really do a lot faster together.
And I want to be clear, I wasn't making accusations. I was just talking about the potential and the fact that we don't know what may have happened. And also the perception that has among people that realize that information. The other point that would be brought up with that is that I know that at least one staff member resigned, at least partially, if not mostly, over this issue. So, what's that? Over the personal information issue. And that was a long-time staff member.
A long time ago.
Yeah. Well, there's been, yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing, that I was at the meeting when this was being discussed, and it was really very flippantly blown off because people said, well, Hawaii's driver's license used to have people's social security numbers on there, so it's not a big deal. And, you know, I'm glad we're moving forward now, but I'm just saying it seemed to take a lot of things happening for us to actually deal with this issue.
Correct. Thank you very much, and thanks for bringing it up so we can put it on a burner.
Yes, and thank you for taking it up.
Thank you.
I'm going to let someone else speak, and then I'll.
Is there anybody else in the front row that hasn't? How do we say this? Everybody in the front row has spoken. Is there anybody? Okay.
Hello there. I'm Joanne. I'm trying to formulate my question still. It has to do with people who have felt intimidated and bulldozed into having to perform now without even being asked if they have time, energy, or the wherewithal in that moment to deal with whatever was brought to them. Because I volunteer in the office, I'm trying to be very careful that I'm saying what I should say and not say what I shouldn't say. Okay. So, you know, I'm stumbling over that. This is a while back, but within the last 6 months, there were 3 or 4 people who, because the topic came up, agreed with eyes this big that this was what they had felt. Now, I'm in counseling and teaching, so I tried to have them see that what was really important, one piece of it anyway, was to be able to say to somebody, excuse me, can you stop? And I want to talk with you, and I'm feeling overwhelmed, or whatever the words are for them. But I didn't know who to go to to say, this is what I'm seeing in the office space with employees, and they don't know where to go to say, I'm feeling overwhelmed and knocked over or imposed upon, or whatever the words are for them. I didn't want to talk to other people about, so-and-so told me that this is how she felt or he felt, and I didn't feel that I could go to Reverend Tim, and maybe I should have, I don't know. I don't know my boundaries or my parameters. So I wanted to know if there was a person who was not on the board and who is not Reverend Tim, who can legally and professionally facilitate something like that. And this is where I feel many of the problems or much of the upset, it gets lost, is that there's no other than person, not on the board, not Reverend Tim, who is supported by the board and Reverend Tim, who is a bona fide counselor or whatever they are, a mediator, facilitator, who can handle those kinds of issues, because I think it's absolutely important. Anyway, and so I'm asking, do we have something like that that I don't know about, or how can we go about getting something like
perfect.
that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I think that our hostility policy and environmental policy is going to have to address all of that. And we likewise, that needs right now on a very big burner to get this fixed.
To be clear, there is not at this time any person of that sort. The senior minister is responsible for the staff, and there is no HR person otherwise. Well, if you don't feel comfortable with going to Reverend Tim or to the board, then yeah. I know. I know.
I think I wanted to just praise you for raising that issue. I actually had a staff member tell me that they were overwhelmed about something, and I tried to redirect the staff member to their boss, which would be Reverend Tim. And I think maybe they didn't feel, this is not a statement about Reverend Tim. Sometimes people just don't, you know what I mean? They just don't feel comfortable. So I actually asked the volunteer if I had permission to intervene, and I got permission. And then I went to somebody else who fixed the problem immediately. But it raises the issue that, I think in this next year, as we're looking at, hey, how can we make things better here? We need to have some kind of mechanism. Maybe we don't have an HR department, but we can probably figure something out. So thank you so much for raising that, because it's all about communication and getting needs met. Thanks.
Yes, my name is Ralph, and I'd like to say thank you to the board for all your service, all your dedication to our community. What I wanted to ask is, at this point, what is the next step towards our ministry? What's the next thing to happen now that our senior minister has resigned, and what do we do moving forward?
Okay. I will share with you as much as is clear with the board, and then I will say, and from here it is unclear. I have been working behind the scenes for quite some time to make sure that we had a transitional minister as soon as the current ministry left. I was able to finally announce today, because I finally got notice 2 days ago, that Nicholas Griffin will come in for 4 to 5 weeks. The reason, one might ask, why just 4 to 5 weeks? The reason is that the board in general, represented by the UWM Liaison Committee, which is composed of 5 of us, Thomas, myself, Debbie, Ricky, and Jerry, have been interfacing with UWM, who has recommended a much longer transitional process where they will provide people that are trained in various specialties. That much we know. I'm going to continue with what we know, and then I'll tell you where we don't know. We have extended the formal offer, which they have accepted, inviting that help in. They have indicated that they have someone who would be available in about 4 to 5 weeks, which is why Nicholas is coming in for 4 to 5 weeks. But that person, at our last conversation, was only available for another 4 to 5 weeks. Now we're starting to get a little grayer. Yeah? After that, there will be, it is their vision that there will be another transitional minister who will come in for a much longer period of time. Part of that reason it still is unknown is that we right now are to be filling in questionnaires to help identify the needs that we have, and they have to identify based on the needs that we have who is best suited to come in. So their current thinking, based on nothing but reading the temperatures and the letters that they have been receiving from the church, is that the final person or persons would probably be here at least 8 months to a year. Now that's still very vague, and it I'm sure will be tempered based on what they get. But so now see how vague it's going to. So now we're looking at almost a year or more, and after then, under their view of it, we would start the minister search. I have already expressed my opinion, and that does not mean that I will prevail, that I would like to see some overlap toward the end of the UWM long-term thing so that we can at least begin the recruitment. Because in my heart of hearts, and I may not prevail, but in my heart of hearts, what would be lovely is UWM finishes and enroll in a whole set of fabulous candidates and we're ready to rock and roll. That does not mean that I will prevail at all, but that's the current plan as definite as it is, which isn't a whole lot of definite.
Thank you.
It's now 3 o'clock. We will no longer have AV. Do people still want to continue? Okay. Ricky is leaving. This is a work day for her.
Sean, I'll be happy to lock stuff up if that will work for people. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I'm Rodney. It's not really a question, but more like we need to look at. Right now, from what I've heard in the past few months, there is very little trust in the board. That has to be repaired. We have to be able to trust the board and know that we can depend on them to do what needs to be done. I think one way that can help is having a board member down in the patio on Sunday. And also a form that whoever talks to them fills in. And it can be pre-printed. I am concerned about, and you write in your concern. Okay? And also, the bottom part will have something you check off. I feel this will benefit the church. You can check that off. Or I can check off, I feel this is detrimental to the church. In other words, what I'm saying is this will help the church, this will be bad for the church. That form can be taken back to the board of directors, board of trustees. It can be discussed. The answer can be written on the bottom half of that form, and that form can be read back to us at the next town hall. The reason there's not a whole lot of trust in the board is because hundreds of questions are asked, and we are getting very, very few answers. For example, one question was, after Tim leaves, what is the process going to be as far as the people working in the office goes? That hasn't been answered yet. That needs to be answered because he's leaving very soon. So they have to know who are they going to listen to. Is the board going to run it? Is there going to be someone that is going to be a volunteer is going to run it? What is the process? We need to know what the guidance is so that we can have faith in the people making the decisions. Thank you.
Sure, and thank you very much. And I will just tell you that the bylaws have got all of the staff under the senior minister. The transitional or the intermediate, the interim minister in my book is the senior minister during that period of time. And so as far as I can tell, reading the bylaws, it's certainly my opinion that staff are still under the minister.
So to be very, very specific, Tim will leave on the 17th. The 18th is a holiday. The 19th, they will run wild without supervision because Nicholas doesn't come till 10 p.m. at night.
There you go.
The next day he will be here and he will stay. We have him guaranteed that he will stay until UWM is ready to send somebody in. Okay, so that's it. We have done our very, very best to try and keep this environment as stable as possible because the staff works very, very hard, and I see how committed they are, and we want them to feel supported by the board. So that's it. I know people had asked before about what is our policy and procedures and whatever, but as Thomas indicated, it's in the bylaws. We bring in an interim minister. The interim minister takes over the duties of the senior minister, plus a whole lot more because he comes with a skill set about transition work. These are all second timers.
Okay, hi everybody. I just wanted to just say that the staff will not be running wild without a senior minister. I mean, we will throw a small party, but I just want to let you know that, whether or not we have an interim minister, transitional minister, whatever, we're pretty responsible individuals that are spirit-led.
Amen.
And take our job and our service seriously. And so I just want you to know that the church is in good hands, that Sunday services will happen,
Amen.
And that we are Christ-centered in all of this, and we have integrity, and we're going to make sure we're doing the right thing at all times. So thank you.
Thank you. And the board, I can only speak, I guess, for myself, but I can tell you the board is so appreciative of the staff. I don't think there's any of us that do not appreciate completely the staff. So blessings to each one of you, many mahalos, and Godspeed.
And that includes volunteers like Diana who function like staff but just don't get paid.
Okay, you might not say this after my presentation, but first of all, before I get into anything heavy, I just want to say mahalo, Board of Trustees, for all your hard work. And I put that bullseye up there just for Dr. Chom. Okay, there was a letter that was handed out at the last board talks. This is by the treasurer, Kathy Whitmire. There were a lot of comments that I had issue with, as you can see, because I have to honestly say that I'm very disappointed in the way some things are explained by this board that lead me not to trust you completely. Some of the members, you're not telling the whole truth, and you're trying to make it appear as if the blame belongs to others. Now, I wouldn't say this for myself, but I am addressing this because Amy Miyamoto works very hard, and she doesn't deserve a letter like this. Item number 2, our bylaws require an annual independent examination of financial statements for the church and school. In early 2015, the board obtained a proposal from a local CPA firm to complete a full audit of the financial statements, but could not proceed because the accounting records and financial statements were not in condition to be audited In particular, numerous bookkeeping errors and unreconciled bank statements resulted in unexplained results on the financial statements. Now, this makes Amy Miyamoto look incompetent, which she is not. The whole truth is the accountant's computer suffered a crash in mid-2013. We thought all computers were being backed up, but they were not. So a lot of time had to be spent trying to rebuild the data. You want to come?
The accountant at the time had a dual backup system. All of it failed. We sent the hard drives to a professional firm, and they were unable to recover anything but a minimal amount of data. And so they've been rebuilding since that time.
Amid many, many angry, disrespectful, and I find this very hypocritical, that some members of the board say we are not disrespectful compared to behaviors to the 2014-2016 board. I find that very unpalatable or very distasteful. But many questions, disrespectful questions and comments were directed to the board, previous year boards, as to when an audit would be completed. Now, we kept telling them that we had to rebuild the data. It would take a lot of time, but for some reason, they distrusted those boards and the employees of the church, thinking that this was not the truth and we were trying to hide something. Please note, this board has not received such angry, disrespectful questions about an audit because we know how long data has had to be rebuilt, how long it would take. And I suppose that when the treasurer first got on the board, she thought it would be such a simple task. And then she found out actually how difficult it was. Item number 4, I'll just skip to the sections that I'm concerned with. Church accounting records also contain uncorrected errors. I was unable to provide any assistance with errors in the preschool data because they have not been made available to the Board of Trustees. Again, makes it sound like Amy Miyamoto. I'm sorry. No, Miyashiro is incompetent. Which is it? I'm so okay, nervous. Wait, why is that? I was unable to provide, okay, any assistance? No. Okay. Now, this goes back to the question that our board member, Richard Hughes, was questioning how come it was taking so long, and then Jan, I believe, was the one who answered that. I'm sorry. I got mixed up and wrote my comments on another slide, I guess. But Jan stated that a lot of the reason that the information was not being provided to the preschool was that the main sticking point about releasing parents and students' information to anybody who was not a school employee would throw the school's licensing in peril, or whatever. I forget what I was saying so many months ago, but they had to refer it to their attorney to make sure that they weren't doing anything to jeopardize their licensing. The preparation of consolidated financial statements and the independent review for 2015 was started about a year ago. This project has not been completed primarily because of unexplained differences between church and preschool accounts, which should be in balance. The audit was not completed primarily because of unexplained differences between accounts which should be in balance. The whole truth is, Amy had submitted all required data info to the auditor. When she didn't hear anything, she called the audit firm and discovered that the auditor that she provided all the information to had left permanently for the mainland, which means that the board had to start fresh with another auditor. Is that correct?
Well, if we're going to stop, I have some questions. Are we still recovering the data, Margie, from the 2013 crash? No longer on staff. I can't speak. So does anyone know whether that's true? Because I thought that was taken care of quite a while ago.
Yeah, I believe it's been inputted, but that was not taken into account.
We are down at the point where there was a list of questions. We had a meeting. The auditors were present, both the one now assigned, Mike, and his supervisor, Katha. And I said, what is still missing from what needs to be done? On that list of about 10 or 11 things, one of them was the unreconciled differences between the school and the church. It is my understanding from Kathy, and I would really like to have all this revisited when Kathy can be here to talk specifically, because I can only do hearsay, is that she and Amy did sit down a week or two ago and have worked through those differences. Now, whether they got through all of them, I don't know. Kathy told me she had identified 3 specific areas that needed to be reconciled. And they were going to talk, and that's as much as I know. So it's a finite list, and it's my understanding they were working together to get it done. Now, again, this does not necessarily mean that there's malfeasance on either side. Typically what happens is something's been recorded twice or something was missed. It's not that anything is bad, but they have to figure out why they don't agree. And it sounded like, from what Kathy told me, that she had a theory anyway as to why she thought there were discrepancies. And again, I thought what she reported to me is that she and Amy, I'm sure she said they at least started. I'm not as sure whether they finished, but they were working on that reconciliation. And that is required by the auditor. The auditor can't move forward with a review if the school says, we gave you $2.98, and the church says we received $4.35. That has to get cleaned up. So that's where they were.
I'm sure what was holding up part of the school information was that this thing about releasing QuickBooks files to non-employees of the school.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that is why both Sergio was reading the black letter of the law a certain way. He retained an attorney, the board retained an attorney, and they have come to an agreement that the regulation and the law to which he was basing his stand is subordinate to the law 414D for nonprofit corporations. So we are now able to move forward now that we have an agreement about how that works out.
Okay, again, the whole truth was that he was not just basing that on his own reading. He had sent, and he copied the board on these letters that he sent to the state licensing bureau asking them about this particular stipulation where only parents and student information could be released to school employees. And they wrote back to him and they confirmed that yes, the Board of Trustees are volunteers. They are not considered school employees.
Okay, and the whole
and
truth.
now what happened after with the attorney?
The whole truth, as you are using that term, is that the attorney then went and called the same licensing agency, and they said, what is the bet? He said, if the board passes a policy, would that correct the situation, making it clear the reading of the statutes? And they said, yes, we would support that policy if a board passes one, which is why we passed the policy, which is why we then had the firestorm at the school. So that was all part of that same issue.
When was that policy passed?
October or November, wasn't it? The policy about the school sharing the data. November 29th. No, that seems a little late, because that's about when the school meeting was, the data sharing policy. Because the school meeting, I think, was November 29th. So I think it was the November or the October meeting. The October meeting.
Okay, so if the policy was passed in October, what did that policy state?
That the data will be shared between the school and the board.
And what about the parents signing?
The parents and part of the policy said, the school manual will be changed to read, and then it gave the quote. And then the other part of the policy was, now I don't remember if it was part of the policy, but the attorney advised that because we were changing the manual, we needed to get parent acknowledgement of the change, because that is required by state law. Well, it's a little bit iffy. If you change services midstream, you have to notify the parents and get their acknowledgement. It was questionable whether or not this policy was a change in a, quote, service or not, but in an abundance of caution, the attorney said you should get their acknowledgement that it's changing.
Okay, but at the time that the letter went out to the parents in November, then Sergio was following the board policy, right? When he sent the letter to the parents in November.
Yes, with the
So he did
exception
not-
of inserting disenrollment and exception of inserting the word consent. Yes, he was. He was letting them know that the policy has changed. We will now be sharing data with the school, with the board of the church. And we wanted to let you know that that has been a change.
So it's not in the policy about disenrollment?
That is correct. Disenrollment was never envisioned, and it is not in the policy.
But disenrollment was...
Disenrollment was a term that was introduced by the school's attorney, as well as the word consent.
And so when did that disenrollment come up?
It came up between a meeting in which, I don't remember the dates, there was a meeting between myself, Reverend Tim, Sergio, Robin Fall, who is representing the school, Andy Bunn, who's representing the church. Between that meeting, which was earlier in the month, and the 20th is the date on the letter that was published. So it was sometime between that, which I think it was the 11th, but I may not be right on the date. So it was in that period from that meeting where everyone met and the concepts were not discussed and the issuance of that letter.
So here, please know that no one on the Board of Trustees reviewed or authorized the letters. Okay, that's true, but it appears that Sergio did not just go off on his own and say they would be disenrolled if they did not agree or consent to having their information released.
I honestly do not know whether it was Sergio or Sergio's attorney that introduced that concept. That's all I know, is that it came up in that letter. But you're right, it might not have been Sergio, it might have been the attorney that introduced it. But the board was not made privy.
It doesn't matter who introduced it. It's just that it was introduced at a time that you had the meeting before the November letter. So my point is that
No, it was not introduced at that early meeting. It was never brought up when all the people were in the room. It was never discussed. It was between the meeting and the letter that it got introduced. That concept was created and introduced in the letter after we all met.
I'm sorry, I thought you...
I'm sorry, we're just losing another board member.
I'm sorry, I thought you said well, I'll just go back and look at the tape. Okay, one final point. Going forward, I believe it would also benefit Unity School to have professional financial management and accounting. I have complete and total trust in Amy as an accountant. So what does that mean? Benefit Unity School to have professional financial management.
Here's what it means, I believe. We were having problems on the church side as well. When we moved from the churches having its own private accountant, and let's not put Amy into it because she is just the placeholder currently. But when we moved it from in-house to a professional CPA firm, the complaints on the church side has dropped to zero. So I think that is the thrust of her statement. Now, that is not to say whether or not the school decides to keep Amy is a whole other thing. I can only, again, speaking only for myself and no one else. I think there's plenty on the front end to keep Amy busy. She has a workload that we don't experience here, right? We just pass the plate and record the cash. We can do it in less than a day. She has billings and money flowing back all the time. So how that reconfigures her position is something that Sergio has to determine, not the board. But I think what Kathy is saying, and I agree with this, as I've already stated, is that consolidating it all under Stephen Lee CPA would make the actual accounting of the books happen more smoothly. And then they would have to decide then how much is left over. But poor Amy only works 2 days a week. Can you imagine to me, trying to run the accounting for a preschool on 2 days a week is just overwhelming. And at the same time she's trying to account for the school, she has to keep up with the fact that we will be in constant audit or independent review. You know, it may have been a decade since we've had an independent review, but we're supposed to have one every year. So that she will be constantly, whoever is in that position, both trying to keep up with the current workload of the school, as well as trying to keep up with any audit or independent review requirements. So that's all I'm saying that I think really needs to be looked at seriously. And it's not a reflection on Amy as an individual at all.
Well, thank you for hearing me out. And it just occurred to me that I forgot what Amy was going through in also building the data was that she had to prepare documents to answer 2 inquiries by the Attorney General's office. Or is it 3? 2 or 3. And then because congregants were asking the 2014, 2015 board, where is the audit, where is the audit? She was just concentrating on church input and leaving the school to lapse. And then when certain members got on the board, it's where's the school audit, where's the school audit? So she had to, I just want to say I have complete trust in Amy and Sergio as employees of the school, and I wanted to present the whole truth. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This has been very enlightening. A question which lingers in my mind is, over the past 2 years, we have lost 2 highly respected senior ministers. And in both cases, they left unhappily. And in both cases, the finger was pointing to the board. So there is something of a cancer which seems to be wrong. And I think this is not only time for board to do some and I should preface, it's not all board members. Certain board members. So the question is, what do we do? I don't believe this is time to turn the other cheek. This is time for us to take action, find out details, and then move forward. So I don't think any one of you can answer this at the moment, and don't expect an answer, but it is for all of us to be thinking and seeing what corrective actions are needed. And again, it's not like turning the other cheek. Thank you very much.
I would like to address that because, in part, the problem is much bigger than the individuals on the board. And the reason it's bigger than the individuals on the board is because the congregation keeps electing people to the board. And if you're having the same problems, given the fact that the board is completely different, then the problem is much bigger than the individuals on the board. Now, when you look at who has been removed or tried to be removed in the last iteration, it was people who were asking very pointed questions about the accounting procedures. And I know for one, because I was in the audience with you, there are a large number of people, and I represented that cause, that were very concerned that we have not been able to have an independent review of our books every year. And I kept electing members of the Board of Trustees that would carry that concern. So what I'm inviting you to say, and what I'm inviting you to think about, is UWM thinks it's going to take 8 to 9 months to sort everything out. And I think we need to, as Jerry says, surrender to that process and realize it's much bigger. It has to be. It has to be much bigger than the in particular individuals, because we keep electing the same individual type, which is what Jan addressed eloquently in her comments when she talked about the system that is here. There is a system that is here where part of the people want transparency and other people want privacy, and therein lies a huge tension. And it's going to take all of us to come together with this to figure out, plus for the professional help of UWM to sort through what's really going on. And I'll be more candid than I ever should be. What has concerned me is when people have said, boy, we need change, I see people clapping and nodding as if they think it's someone other than them. We all have to change. We all have to figure out, why can't we be more loving? Why can't we love unconditionally? Why can't we go to the person we're upset about? Why do we have to say, I'm mad at Elaine and I'm going to tell 5 other people about it? That's the kind of dynamic we need to address. Okay? Thank you.
Just want to add, I look at it this way. People who come here as senior ministers have been vetted by highly professional people. They come respected, etc. So I don't think there's any problem that side. You've alluded to that. The problem is here. We need to correct ourselves. And I guess in some cases it means recalling some board members, and we should be prepared to do that. Thank you.
The other thing that I want to mention for your consideration is we went through the same kind of transition. I was not here. I can only report it. But I understand that after Strickland, I think it was, they went through several people before they had another person of stability. And who was that person of stability? Sky St. John. And in my opinion, one of the reasons they may have gotten stability with Sky St. John was because he lived here before. He has lived in the most remote place on earth, and he was comfortable living here in the most remote place on earth. Both of the ministers that we have hired since then, if you think about where they lived on the mainland, it was not easy to get a flight back. And you know what makes you feel alone? When your family is in need and you realize you've got to do a whole lot of traveling to get there. So I'm not saying the board is innocent. I am not saying that. But I'm just saying I think there are a lot more factors at play than just let's blame the board and remove 2 board members. And my concern is if we think it's that simple, we won't really be taking a look at the harder things, which is, for example, how do we convince UWM that this is a remote place and it's hard to keep people? Oh, that's fine. You can think it's an excuse or not. Everybody will make up their own mind. I'm just saying it's a very broad and complicated situation. And in both cases, the people who came from the Midwest or the Eastern Seaboard, in both cases, they had family members in their immediate family who were ill. So it's not easy. And when my sister was dying, and she just lived in California, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for me to know that she was dying and I couldn't just jump on a plane and be there. Thank you.
Okay, Salim, thank you so much for bringing that up. I think it's a really foundational and important issue that we really need to all look at. And I know geography is part of the equation, the remoteness. I think there is a much bigger issue below the geography also, okay? And it has to do with culture. It has to do with the church culture, especially the culture of about the last 20 years when we've been on this roller coaster. And that is something that UWM, working together with us, is probably going to take a hard look at. I hope so. And hopefully we will come up with what those common denominators are, all right? So you talk about the board being responsible for 2 ministers leaving. There was only one person on the board today that was around when Jack departed, okay? Just one. It's a completely new board except for one member. Yeah. So blame it on her. I treat her like my sister. And I had 5 sisters. Anyway, so there is a common denominator here, and it's deep, it's foundational, and it has to do with power structure and control, and it's exactly about today's message that was given by Reverend Tim. So I could, I've been on the board about 2 years and 4 or 5 months. I replaced someone who was unseated in a term because they were voted out. But if we don't change direction, we're going to end up where we're heading. And we've headed up and put the boat up on the rocks time and time again. So there's a cultural shift that needs to happen. And really, to me, it's a spiritual answer. It's not about politics. It's not about getting a voting block going and unseating board members. It's really not. That's going to take us down the exact same path again and again. So I really look forward to questions like that really point towards a deeper foundation of what the problem is, and then working with UWM. And as Joanne points out, and everybody's aware of, we need to look at our own part in it, every one of us, myself included. What can we have done? What could we have done differently? And who is the hardest person to see in the world? It's ourselves. But who is the only person that we can change in the world? It's us. So God has one heck of a sense of humor. The worst person to do the job is the only person that can do the job. But we can do that job. But it's a spiritual evolution that needs to occur at the church and get away from the politics and the back and forth and the finger pointing. That is, to me, the solution. Thank you for bringing that up.
I agree with that, too. I have 3 actually kind of quick things. And I'm approaching this as an organizational psychologist at the moment, so that it might provide another avenue. I know we all have to look at ourselves spiritually, but if there's an organizational issue, that has to be addressed. And the first one, and I have been watching for the last hour in the front office, which is nice. It's much more emotional in here. The first one is, it did seem like there was a legal conflict between what the school thought about in terms of confidentiality of the parents' data and the board's bylaws and requirements of what was due. That, then it became a personal thing, but to me, it was still a legal conflict. And so I have compassion for what you do in that situation. And to me, and I know that there was some work done on this, you solve problems through the law by going back to the law and working out those legal conflicts. I'm not addressing that we should do this right now at this moment, but it's just, I think there's a place instead of pointing fingers and yelling at each other. This is another way of doing it and saying, you know, they were under laws of confidentiality under the Department of Education. We were under bylaws. So that's a legal conflict, has to be resolved. My second question is that there seem to have been great concerns about certain people's behaviors, and on an organizational level, I want to ask, is there an HR policy? Actually, Kathy just handed me the manual, which was amended in 2010, of the HR policy of what was supposed to happen, whether it was by the minister, by a staff member, or by any person. And it seems like, you know, there's a somewhat basic policy, I don't think it's really fleshed out, of addressing the, having the person make a document and and document it, and then addressing that person, and then, you know, just going through the channels. So if there is an issue, that there's a warning. If the behavior has been disruptive, harassing, inappropriate, there's a warning, and then there's usually a write-up, and then there is action taken. And that, I actually read the sentence in there, that a person can be removed if there is a problem. And I'm just saying this, again, as a general organizational thing, so we don't have to go on for months and months saying who said you know, why isn't this just being addressed in that? And the last comment I want to make is, as a spiritual person, that there seems to be a paradigm of politics in this, and versus governance. Politics seems to be that I have my opinion, I want to get my way, I get the votes, you know, and there could be aggression towards the other, or whatever. And suddenly you're on a faction. You're with us, you're with them. And I don't see how you can conduct governance under that. I've had some of the happiest experiences of my life have been in governance with groups where it was much like going through the bylaws committee, where you raised an issue, it went around, you got everybody's thoughts, you said, what do we need to do? You got everybody's thoughts, you moved forward, you had kind of spiritual input, and you just took the next step. That's a different thing of consensus, and at least in terms of collaboration. A political paradigm will always divide the church, and we know a church divided has fallen. So those are the three, and I'm just suggesting those as suggestions that take it out of the personality and put it back into the system. Nevertheless, we all do have to do our part, no question about it. So I don't think I have a question. Is that? Okay.
Are there other Chris, you got?
Yeah, some courage. Let's see. All right, I want to, we've covered a lot of stuff here, and I have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to ask, and you guys can see what you think about it. I do want to go back to the school one last time and just ask a few questions about that. Because I'm concerned about the parents' perceptions and the reputation of the school. We have one of the best preschools on the island. It has an excellent reputation. And the philosophy that they're teaching in the preschool is unity philosophy. They're teaching these children how to be lights in the world, and that has an impact for the rest of their lives. So anything that jeopardizes that teaching and the generational impact that we create concerns me very deeply. So I want to make sure that moving forward, the parents are on board with what's going on and that they feel comfortable with what's going on. Because another thing that parent mentioned to me is that the parents were booing the board and calling for resignations. So is that true? Did that happen?
As I recall, there were a few. It certainly was not the whole crowd. There were a few, I think, about where Eric was sitting. I couldn't tell how many, but I would guess less than a half dozen. I don't recall if they called for resignations. That part I don't recall. We did receive 4 letters after that meeting in the morning. What I found significant is the letters stopped at I may not be absolutely right, but it was like 6:59 p.m. with the board meeting at 7 p.m. And then after that, we didn't receive anything until just recently, right? And then the Laos and I have been back and forth because they had put on questions about the school, but they said they could not be here on the 10th. So we've been talking about when we might, bring that forward. But other than that, I think that's it for letters.
Okay. And would it be possible for us to, if we find out who those parents are, to reach out to them and see if we can, so that they are on the same page and feel good about what's going on moving forward?
What I'd like to do, if you're going to do that, what I'd like to do is see if they can talk amongst themselves as to when would be mutually convenient, if they can even find a date that is mutually convenient, because that's what we started coming up against. Oh, we'll be gone here, but we'll be back here. But then, because the Laos are not here this week, or at least not for this meeting. Next week is Tim's last, so we thought probably inappropriate to do anything. Then we have town hall. So it's more the date scheduling. But so if you want to jump in and facilitate, that would be the thing, is to figure out which is the most convenient for them, and then we can just sort of orient and have Jan. By then, Jan will have, I think, more going on the school committee, and we can start picking it up from there.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't have their personal information, but if they approach me, I'd be happy to aid in that. And I appreciate you guys working with them. I think we're all on the same page that we want a good relationship and we want them to feel good about what's going on.
And Chris, those to me are key points, because having them in the loop and in the know, I think, is very important. One thing that might be helpful is to just point them towards replay. This is going to be up on our website. So to be truly informed, we've had a lot of school discussion today. You may want to invite them to get on replay and take a look at it. Okay. Also, the other foundational thing is the new committee that's being formed, to start thinking about how the school is going to interface and who those individuals are going to be that are going to interface. So getting organized there might be helpful also.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Okay, and this question would be more appropriate if the entire board was here. So I don't know if I should wait until all of you are here so you can respond.
We'll be having these almost every week.
Okay, so maybe next week if people are interested.
Except not next week, because we thought it would be inappropriate.
After Tim's,
with Tim's last day.
Okay.
But certainly the week after that, it's not only town hall, but it'll be the first Sunday that Nicholas will be here.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, you're right.
Okay,
So
well, maybe I'll just ask it. And,
would it be beneficial to continue with the question?
And whoever's here that can respond to it. And I have brought this issue up in the past. So I guess as board members, I would like to know from each of you, if you did not know or understand that Tim felt he was being treated inappropriately and disrespectfully. And I ask this because I mean, there are recordings of the board meetings that exist where he specifically says, I'm very unhappy. I'm being treated disrespectfully. How can we resolve this? I'm willing to work in any way we can. I don't believe I treated you disrespectfully. And that was one of the, at least that meeting was one of the ones that he cried during, because it was during his senior minister report. And he said he had never shared personal information during that report. And yet, and part of that discussion was the fact that if things didn't shift, he was going to have to begin looking for a different place. So how is it that it's such a surprise that he would be moving on?
I can give you my personal thing of what was going on. We had quite a bit of board contention. We knew that. And then in December, I think your sister, Carol Gallagher, did a session which was a year ago. So that was in December. And we agreed out of that session to come up with four statements that we put on little tent cards in front of us at every board meeting to keep us more mindful. So we thought and we felt that the board was getting along much, much better. Much better. Then Tim comes in and speaks very generally about how unhappy he was. And I know several of us, I felt, and I was looking around at others who were going, is he talking about us or somebody else? We were just unsure because his description was so general. He just talked about there's a lot of dissension in the church, there's a lot of contention in the church, there's a lot of triangulation, so we were unsure. I then spoke with him the following Wednesday because I had a normal meeting, and I suggested that we hold executive sessions because it's a personnel matter. And he never requested the executive session. And as I think I said in the last time, I think when we get to the point that we are certified that we can hire a new minister, I think perhaps what we should do, and again, I'm suggesting for a future board, by the time we get a new minister, I may not even be on the board, that we just proactively start including an executive session to allow the senior minister to vent, so that the minister knows he's got, or she has a venue, and the board, because the executive sessions are very different from regular board meetings, and you can really get down and have some meaningful discussion. The formal board meetings, and most of you know because you've attended, are very formal and very structured, and there's not really much of a flow, but in executive session we can suspend a lot of all those rules and get down to something more meaningful, which is where personnel matters really belong. So I think proactively we should do that.
And that's something that can happen, because I believe there was a policy that executive sessions had to be done in a very specific way and transparently. So you could just say that this executive session was for the minister to speak with the board, or?
Executive sessions are published, the agenda, there are only two things you can take into executive session: personnel matters and legal matters. And personal matters, I think, are fairly obvious. Legal matters are because attorney-client privilege can apply, so you have to keep those confined. What you are then required to report out of an executive session is any decision or action taken by the board. You are not supposed to publish anything of the discussion. That is to remain private, to allow people to have a fuller discussion. So if we have a minister who is upset and we have this discussion, then out of that might come schedule a training session or schedule a group therapy session or whatever action the board decide to take.
And this is just a personal observation for myself. If I was a board member and the senior minister made those kind of statements, I think I would personally go to him and ask those questions. And that's one of the things that I believe has been a disconnect in just communicating and asking how people are doing, what their perceptions are of what's going on. Because a lot of things are getting missed that seem to me to be basic. You know, I mean, if we're talking about spiritual principles and how we speak to people and deal with people and care about people, I have gone to staff members and said, how are you doing? What's going on? Are you happy? Are you unhappy? Do you feel like you're being heard? I've done the same thing with Tim. I've done it with some of the board members. I've done it with Sergio. I've done it with the counseling center is my partner, and then the Healing Center as well. And if you do that, you get a lot of information that you might not otherwise receive. So that's just a suggestion.
I can address that a little bit too, Chris. And I think it's important. Joanne brought up that my sister came out. She's a corporate psychologist / executive coach, and she's all over the world. And she came out to give us a Saturday of her time. What she found when we did the DISC, which stands for the dominantly driven, the introspective kinds of people, the ones that are structured, the ones that are more cognizant of things that are going on. I don't know what all of them stand for. I did in the past. One of the observations that came out of it is of the 9 board members, 5 of us were high Ds. Driven, we're going to go through, we're dominant, we're going to make things happen. And one of the comments that she made to us is, you guys need to know, if left to your own personalities, you are going to drive right through your congregation, leaving a wake of destruction in your path. You've got to be very careful, and you have to listen very carefully to the C's, the I's, and others. Tim was a group of his own. He had nobody else. And she says, you guys are going to have to listen very closely to this man, or you'll run him you'll run him off. And we did very well for a period of time. We listened, we tried to be there, we tried to do what we needed to do, and we had our tent cards. But over a period of time, we went back to our own personality devices, not devices, our own personality thrusts. It's the way that we are. And we did not keep the commitments that we had to ourselves to be careful and be able to watch what it was that we were doing. It happens. And it's nothing it's not to be saying that anything's bad. What it means, though, for the congregation is this congregation needs to be careful, too, of finding a diversity of personalities to put on this board. Don't put all spiritual people. Don't put all dominantly driven people. Don't put all, because those of us that are in a group don't know what we don't know because we don't see what we don't see. Does that make any sense? And so we've got to have multitudes of people. And I think it's just important that we all take that and understand it.
If I could add one thing about the disc, I mean, thank you for having your sister come in and do that. That was an amazing process. I'd love to see that happen for the entire community. But what's interesting about the disc is there are the warnings, but there's also the advantages. Every one of those quadrants, there's a really positive foundational thing that is actually very good. But everything in balance. You got to be careful about, the dominant individuals tend not to listen. But they do get things done, and we need that. But we also need the listening side. So it creates awareness. But we did that with Carol Gallagher. Reverend Tim recruited Kumu Ramsey. He came in and he did some Ho'oponopono. Yeah, and Reverend Tim came up with that on his own. And we also had David Earls come through just a couple months ago. He was an amazing guy. I wish we could do more with him, but he moved to the West Coast. Jan has been instrumental in giving us these little pop-up reminders. But Chris, what I think this really points towards, and for everybody, is that ongoing care, ongoing exposure, ongoing forums would really help us. Now, there's the Eye of the Storm, Reverend Levitt over there, as well as the Q Effect the year before, Reverend Levitt. But conflict resolution, I think it was Shapiro last June. He came through from Maui, yeah. He did a one-day workshop, but I think we need ongoing forums for this. And I really want to compliment everybody today. I think the back and forth, the hearing of the concerns, and the ability to speak is a wonderful thing for this community. So I'm really pleased at the outcome of this. I look forward to more of it. But those particular forums, when we do that inner work and how we show up, to me, those are critical, absolutely critical. And I'd love to see a lot of those facilitated. We probably have talent right here in the room that could probably run some of those groups. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to compliment this congregation today. The honesty, the transparency, but yet the tenderness and the empathy and the compassion that is present has made it to where we can truly communicate, and we're not listening. 90% of all communication is body language, etc. We have done a marvelous job communicating with love so that we could hear the words that we used. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you, all of us. And Reverend Levitt, thank you for levitating all of us over there. You've kept us, and thank you. It's 4. Do we, I think it's getting close to, okay. Yeah, exactly. And we'll get Reverend Levitt to close us out, too.
Yeah, I just want to mention, I think it's wonderful that we have these great board trainings, and those are oftentimes paid. I mean, we're paying facilitators for these trainings, is that correct?
Most of them. I was able to...
Yeah, so in that case you didn't, but most of them. I'm just saying, if we're going to have these trainings, which I think are really necessary, and this community is paying for those trainings, we really have to be utilizing them and committing to doing what we're doing. Otherwise, we're not being fiscally responsible.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
no,
okay.
Completely.
And I wanted to, I'm sorry, she wanted to respond.
I just wanted to mention again the business of the board is always changing. So I was not present when Carol Gallagher did her training with the board. I came on the board and I got nothing. I got no Robert's Rules of Order. I got no, this is what's been going on. I got no, this is what's expected of a board member. And I never was a board member before, so I'm kind of sitting there for 2 or 3 months going, yeah. And, Catherine Burton gave me books. That was great. I began to learn what was going on. My point, though, is that the training has to carry over. New board members need orientation, and yeah. I took the disc on my own. Turns out that I'm pretty evenly divided between about 3 of them. So I don't know how that works, but anyway, that's just really a plug for let the new board members know what's going on. I did not know Reverend Tim was unhappy until June. And then when I did, I had no success getting a meeting with him. I kind of think there's some divine order in that. How do all my electronic communications not go where they're supposed to go or not get seen where they're supposed to be seen? How does the appointment that gets made be put on the wrong week? It was just so many happenstances that I feel like I wasn't even supposed to talk to him. Okay. Which I was really sad when I finally did and found out what was going on.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
And the last thing here that I think is really important is, can we talk about the ramifications of losing a senior minister because he wasn't heard or felt unsafe on this campus? The last time that let's just talk about the search, ministerial search. That costs, I think it's about $12,000 to do a search.
Right.
Okay. Plus, if we find a new minister who's coming here, if they come from the mainland, the moving expenses can be $18,000. And then before that, we're also talking about, which we need, a transitional minister. The last time we had a transitional minister with expenses and, cost, it was, I think, between $60,000 and $80,000 for the church. So the ramifications for what our minister experienced, the ramifications to this church is probably, I'm going to guess, at least $100,000. Is that fiscally responsible? I mean, that needs to really be considered.
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up. And you're right. We have no earthly idea what this is going to cost, the totality. And in some ways, it's kind of sad because we were looking at how much may have been misspent and put in a different place, and it adds up to. We worry about the pennies and we lose the dollars in the process of where we went spiritually with it. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate that, and thank you guys for hearing that.
Hi again. Just a few things. One of the things that Joanne said that about what the congregation wants, I just wanted to clarify that she said there's a conflict because we want both transparency and privacy, and I don't think that they are two separate things. And I think we can have both, that we can have privacy for people's personal information, and we can have transparency from the board to the congregation.
Exactly. Thank you. And we've seen that here.
Yes.
So thank you.
And that's another comment. Again, thank you very much, board. And special kudos to you, Tom. You have stood up and acknowledged some of the maybe.
It's all being transparent, and we all need to be transparent. And Tim's thing today was, you can't, whatever it is doesn't exist. And it doesn't. All we got to do is just be open.
Right. And there's so much strength in that. Thank you so much.
Sure. Got to be vulnerable.
One other thing is that, I think that they agree that there has been lots of great work done here today. There was some people that were upset about certain things, and with some information that was given, clarification was made, and it was like, oh, okay, I get it now. There doesn't seem to be a forum where that communication can happen and that it is disseminated to all of the people in the congregation. May I suggest that maybe we have, in conjunction with Rodney's suggestion about, the suggestion or the little slip that you put that you have comments or whatever concerns, that it can, the questions or concerns along with the answers can be put in a sort of blog format on the website.
Yeah, perfect.
So that this is something that everybody can have access to, and so that there's none of the triangulation and the rumors and all of that, because if we don't know, people will come up with their own conclusions, and that's what we don't want. So if we can get those answers, the facts, the details in a forum that everybody can have access to, not just speaking to one person or I'll email you or whatever. But a lot of this is concerns for a lot of people in the congregation.
Thank you.
My big
Yeah,
fan there.
exactly. And we did have community, I'll be real brief, Sally. We did have community talk for a period of time. It went on for 6 months, 9 months, a year, something in that order. And, we had all of this energy when this happened the last time, and we had huge crowds in here for a period of time, and it dwindled, and then it got to where there was nobody here for community talk. And so the board kind of said, well, is it necessary anymore? And it's kind of when we stopped, things came back up, and so, yeah.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting that it's put on the website, because then you don't have to have this, and the people that would get the information were only the people that were present.
Perfect.
So this would be sort of a record as well.
Thank you. No, that's a great idea. Thank you. Thanks so much, Allison.
And sorry, one last thing. I agree that there is perhaps a more larger underlying problem or issue with the congregation or the board, you know, as Richard said, like the culture or whatever. But I also believe that there is also, and it's something that needs to be acknowledged, that there are individuals that have issues, and that those issues need to be addressed with those people. I don't think that we can just kind of sweep that under the rug and say, put it under the blanket of we have a bigger problem.
Right.
Based on what, you know, people have been saying, there are specific details that I don't think they're going to go away unless they get addressed.
And it's very possible that you're right. The personalities of personalities are personalities. I think probably, this is a personal opinion, and I'll be transparent. I think that the best thing Reverend Tim did was to bring this whole thing up and make it to where everybody that was driven and was going to go through took heed, because now the law is in the process of it. And yeah, people took notice and said, it's important.
So I just want to be ensured that the board will go forward with these investigations, you know, as to past transgressions or whatever, because I really don't think that we will be able to move forward. I mean, we are a body, and if some of us are left behind, that's not what we want to do.
Gotcha. And it's going to be important for the congregation to hold the feet of us to the fire, to look at what's going on and to fix things. So thank you. Please make sure you do that for us. Make sure we're cognizant and aware.
And I think one of the biggest things in that process that the board can do is to have the structure that needs to be followed. Now, whether the parties step up and follow that structure or not, I don't know, but we do have a policy on our books right now. The parties can step up and start to utilize that policy, but I think we need more than that. And what I've seen today and what I've heard today, it needs to be ongoing, and it needs to be the right forum at the right time. This forum today is a lot of board and information sharing and keeping in touch, taking the pulse of the community. But I think we can go deeper than that, and I think we really need to. Not only on interpersonal things that happen, but, you know, like on the board or between staff and whatever, or ministers and board or whatever. But having those in place, I think, is really important. And I think stepping up more as the board, which to me a lot had to do with the ministerial side of the business. But this has been an education. You know, we're losing a minister. So this has been an education maybe to not allow or look at or think that, okay, we're not part of the problem too, in that we didn't step up and start advocating for that. Or as a community, coming up with those ideas. So this is a forum that gives us the feedback and the ideas. Now, then there's the logistics and there's getting the work done. So hopefully that will work out also.
Sally, join us.
I'm sort of following up on what Chris said about there's this bigger issue, and we can talk about individual things, whether it's the school and explaining that and all of that, although I do think that we have not fully or adequately addressed Reverend Tim's experience and what that was about. And I mean, he's saying he's leaving. It's going to cost the church $100,000 financially, in addition to all the emotional turmoil. So that should not be well, it's done, and now we don't want it. We want to walk on tiptoes. We don't want to point fingers. We have to get down to specifics at some point on what happened and whether there were actions taken that should not have been taken, and consequences for those. And I think that when you have the board, and you said there are like 5 dominant people, and that's a recipe for disaster. And if you've got dominant people who are determined to get things done, like Richard said, they get things done. Well, it matters how they get things done. And I think that is the key. You can be demanding and insistent and aggressive and hostile and just you're going to get your way. I mean, I was here at a town hall meeting months ago, maybe in the spring, and Kathy was, she was rightfully concerned about her the school. I think she covered that, and she's been, on her, her decision to pursue that. But how she did it, and I was just appalled that she stood up there and was so rude to Reverend Tim and confrontational about why hasn't this been done, and you should have done this by now, and by what date are we going to have it done? And it's like, Sergio had, even if Sergio didn't, but she knew he had a legitimate concern about the license of the school. And you work with that, but this idea that you're going to bulldoze, and like you said, your sister said, people can just bulldoze the church into ruin, if you let them. And so I think it matters how it's done. And we can't put up with, sometimes there's a cost of getting things done, and the cost is too high. And it's just too high. You're better not to have done it. It's like my former husband used to say when I couldn't make a decision, any decision is better than no decision. But you just have to realize that we cannot put up with board members who will be aggressive and confrontational and hostile and abusive on a regular basis. It just doesn't work. And I think maybe board candidates should be required, I don't know if it's too late for this time, but from now on, they take a DISC test and we get the results so that we know who we're electing. And we're not electing 5 dominant people. And but I don't think we can just say, well, that's in the past and Reverend Tim left. No, he left for reasons. And the congregation is not happy that he left. And we need to address it and do remedial action.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. Please.
So one thing that I would like everyone to, remember and consider is that, in fact, after that DISC, the congregation elected Jerry Denton and me to the board. Now, I don't know about Jerry's DISC, but I'm guessing he's not a D. Y'all know I'm not. I was like 3/4 different things. So the board is not the same as it was, and do take that into consideration. Also, I understand you're wanting to have that information, but that is definitely crossing a privacy line because the DISC is a personal.
It's a decision to run for the board, and if they know that that's a requirement, they can choose to do it or to run or not. I don't know.
This is also true, but we've had so few candidates.
Well, that's for
I don't want to
day.
discourage
That's for another
people.
day. But the fact that the board has changed with you on it, I think part of the problem is if you have dominant people, and especially dominant people who are not, whether it's self-aware or they don't care or whatever, willing to try to temper their desire to get things done with a collaborative way of doing it, then the people, the S's or the conciliators on the board can just get run. They're going to sit there and go like, well, I guess we have to go along with it, and like, or you have people who are just clashing all the time because you've got different points of view among people. But it's not that there can't be dominant people. You do want people who are motivated and want to get things done, but it's the willingness to be destructive and abusive that is not acceptable.
I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree, but I just want to put it in context. And there are probably not 5 members that are still Ds at this point. I don't think so.
Yeah. So I think there may be a miss thing about the DISC. If you're in the D category, and I'm not, I'm an SC. But if you're in the D category, that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. So what Sally was talking about was the what you are, your personality traits. But there's the how you manifest and to get your job done. The disc will not tell you that. It's mute to that. You get to know your board members. You get involved in committee work, and you get to know these people.
I'm sorry. It's ridiculous to think that every member of the congregation can get to know every board candidate or every board member. It just can't happen. And before they are nominated or elected, I mean, it was a lovely idea, but we need somehow, I don't know if organizations do this, but there could be a vetting on not just Ds, because you're right, Ds are fine. And as I said, it's how they manifest that and what they're willing to do. And if they're determined at all costs to get their own way because it's power and winning, then we need to be able to somehow find that out and weed people out. I think there should be a stronger vetting process.
Well, any part of that quadrant could be power and control. Any part could be. It has nothing to do with that. So you're suggesting that there be some kind of a personality inventory that you call weeds out people. So, but we might want to look at that. And the nominations things for this year are pretty well gone already. You know, today was the last day.
Quick suggestion on that. We went through the bylaws, and there are 5 points that the potential candidates, which means that they are aligned to unity process, they're aligned to disagreeing in love, that they are, in this ilk. The other thing is, and this used to be the case, that you had to take certain SEE classes, like nonviolent communication and things like that. Gary Simmons' whole transformation of the church is around having unity-wise people on the board. In other words, people who've been on the path, who've been to classes, are trained, so you know that they're willing and they're this. And that got kind of poo-pooed, which could be much to our unfortunate consequence. So a suggestion is, and it'd have to go through policy, that they have to have at least 2 or 3 SEE courses.
I just wanted to say, I like that, but you don't usually find out about a person until they get on the board. And when they meet one-on-one, the behavior is different in a group setting versus one-on-one when the door is closed. And we don't know.
2 answers to that. The particular person was asked how many SEE courses they had taken, and it was kind of poo-pooed in their answer. I was told. They were asked how many, and at that time, it sort of thinks that's not so important. Now we're realizing it's very important. The other thing is what you do is you could have a group interview up here of not just individual talks, but a group interview of them, and with some disagreement, just to see their personality types. I mean, before you vote.
Okay.
I know you don't see it, but you could.
Well, these are all good suggestions, and I think moving forward we should take a look at those. But I would like to make one key point, that whatever paper you have on the wall, whatever your accomplishments are, that says nothing about your character, okay? And the character is the person themselves. That's the who shows up. You can have a lot of paper on the wall, and even all the way up to the Pope, credentials as a Pope. But if Jesus walked through the door, he wouldn't have any of that, but he might be the best person on the board.
And also, to me at this moment, it doesn't matter if you've been coming to Unity for 40 years and going to C classes. And that behavior, that misbehavior is being done behind closed doors, okay? Not in front of a group, okay? You could be all sweet and in front of a group. But when you go behind closed door to meet with the other person, that's when that personality comes out. Yeah.
That would be good. HR policy would be good for handling the individual specific issues. But we're talking about knowing, and prevention. Okay. But you would think that the community would get to know each other. It's pretty clear we don't, you know. And really, who you vote for, leadership on the church is very important. The board for governance, the selection of the minister, that's really important. Who that person is.
What I will tell you too is that the politically correct culture that we're currently living in makes it to where we're supposed to ask no questions of anyone. The elections committee, bylaws section 5, in a lot of the people that were in the congregation, the two that decided to drop off from the nominating committee that were our congregational representatives, dropped off because that section, in their opinion, neutered their abilities to be able to ask questions, to do exactly what we're talking about. And so what needs to happen is this information needs to go back to those or whomever is on the election committee to say, that needs changed. We need to be able, and whether it's in a group like Catherine says, and get multiple people, maybe the group that interviews them should have a D, an I, an S, and a C, to see what it is that they can pick up on an interview with that individual, because that will tell you more than what the person's going to tell you. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I'll say, as far as having board members that take SEE classes, I think that's a really wonderful, absolutely wonderful thing for people to do. And successful churches usually have board members that have taken classes that are prepared by the church so that everyone is on the same page and understands the philosophy and the values that we all share. And my invitation to the congregation is take these classes. Take these classes, and if you ever feel called to serve, you'll have that added experience, because that's the reason why that changed, because it was very hard to find anyone willing to run for the board. So we continually got the same group of people or people that didn't have that philosophy because there just was no one else standing up to do that. Let's see. Okay. One of the things that, and I know Joanne's not here, but I'm just going to say it anyway, that she had brought up earlier was that congregants are, electing the board. And many people have brought this up since, but we are not allowed to vet those congregants. I am running for the board. I am happy to be vetted. You can ask me any question that you want. I want you to do a police report. I want you to do the whole thing. I'm happy for you to do that. I think
Where is your shadow,
background check,
Chris?
the whole 9 yards. Go for it. You're welcome to. And I would hope that other candidates would consider that as well.
Exactly. I got it.
Let's see. And also, I believe, Richard, you had talked about the difference between politics and the spiritual answer. And I think, for me, what we're trying to do here is a spiritual process, because we're using discernment. We are discerning what is going on in this community that is causing it to have dysfunction and pain and suffering and heartbreak, literal heartbreak. I have suffered this. Ministers have suffered this. Staff, people who have left this church, people who have felt hurt. That's incredibly sad. And if we do not have the discussion, the painful discussion, and discern what's going on in a loving way and a respectful way, then we cannot take right action. And that's also a spiritual principle. You must discern and then take right action. And what so many people have been asking for, including parents, including congregants, including staff, many, many, many people, is that I am willing to take personal responsibility for my words and actions and be held accountable for those words and actions. And I would hope that any member of this community would be willing to be held to that standard. It is a basic standard in society. So that would be my suggestion and encouragement, that we be able to face into this, have accountability. That doesn't mean punishing people. It simply means taking right action. We can still forgive, we can move forward, but we also have to be willing to do the necessary work.
Thank you. Thank you. Exactly. Exactly. One more?
One more.
Are there more
I'm sorry.
than...
Real quick.
You got another one?
You know, someone talked about the mistrust, and then we have to have trust again in our board. And I'm not saying this to target you, Richard, but there was something that you said that really, you know, I'm like a dog, can't get off this bone. But when Sally was talking about, you know, getting policies and going into details and specifics about specific situations and people, I feel like your answers are always about, you know, the periphery. And I don't feel ensured that you're on board to move forward on that particular issue. And I think that it's pretty evident that, you know, a lot of people that have spoken today have that viewpoint that there are specific instances, specific people involved. There is hurt feelings, as Chris said, disrespect. You know, I think that those things need to be addressed. And I just want to feel like you're hearing this and you are going to give your personal effort towards that. And for everyone on the board.
Yeah. This is very interesting because you spoke earlier, and a lot of what you got back in the discussion was generalities. And then I took the mic and I focused it right down to specifics. So I hope you recall that. And it's important. No, well, for you it might look like switching. But here's the thing. What can the board do in getting involved in other people's individual things? We can do a lot. We can safeguard the process. We can have the policies and procedures. But what I want to be very careful about is the board can't do it for a party that doesn't want to participate. That might be the moment of confusion. But I'm very serious about if there are specific things, let's follow up. And I think I ended my first discussion about that with, let's do it. And there was a little bit of applause, if I recall. And we can check the tape on replay if you'd like to review that. But we're online, so if you want to be heard online, you would have to use the microphone. So anyway, I notice we're kind of going over the same things again. And is there a consensus of closing out the meeting with Reverend Levitt?
All right, let me ask a real quick question. All right, does everybody feel complete in the process of today? Complete. Does people feel like they've been heard? Do people feel like that their questions were answered? No, I got you. And all we can do is one day at a time. The other piece of what happened, though, was the way that Allison addressed was a great example for all of us to see how confrontation, non-angry, non-violent communication can heal. So thank you, Richard. Thank you all. Thank you so much. And you want a quick, and then
okay, shameless commercial, a plug for SEE classes. So, and we're having 2 coming up beginning in March. You can, it's on the board. We're having the 12 Powers and Acts to Revelation. Go read the thing on Acts to Revelations. It's all about how the church was formed, how they solved problems, how they chose their minister. It's all in there. We also just want you to know that the SEE folks are thinking of doing possibly monthly or every once in a while trainings, 1 session only after a Sunday church on nonviolent communication or things like that, so that we can, you know, bring into education.
And before I do that, I'd like to plant a seed in the board members that are still here. You might want to consider having a person called a keeper of the flame who is authorized and to stop anything that is happening in a meeting and call a time of prayer. UWM has an extraordinary person, Reverend Paulette Pipe, that does that. Go to her website if you want to see something that's done. And if what they do is they sit, and if they sense a problem, sense anything other than the truth, they stop everything. Nobody says no. They get up and they stop everything right there. Everybody returns to truth, and we carry on. So I would, it's called the Keeper of the Flame. Paulette Pipe. Paulette Pipe, Keeper of the Flame. P-I-P-E. She's extraordinary. Anybody who's ever been in her presence knows that she's extraordinary. I've seen her in action. She has stopped a room of about, 1,000, I think it was, at a conference. She got up and stopped a room because it got a little left. But anyway, so please consider that. Consider that. And before we do anything, can we look around the room? Not just look with your eyes, but look with your eyes of love. Folks, what we are is love. And look around and see how extraordinarily wonderful, beautiful, and unique that love is being expressed. That love is to be expressed at all times. If it is unloving, stop, breathe into your core essence of being, which is love, and behave and live and act from there. We are love, is what we are. Amen. I do things different. Together we must do everybody sing. We must together. We must together in unity and love. Go forth and be love. Excuse me? Love.